Everybody take a deep breath. That was a lot coming at you there. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. Is this thing down again?
No, it's working.
Okay. How about now?
It
goes down when I'm not talking on it, and then it seems to come back up after we've been on it for a minute.
Turn it off?
No.
And turn it back on? Here,
No, ma'am. Nope. Okay. All right. Oh, there we go. There it is. Mark Houston used to say, I can't live off of food I ate last week, and I can't stay sober on a spiritual experience that I had. There it goes. Whatever just happened, it just came up. It's been doing that. But he used to say, I can't stay sober. I can't live off of food I ate last week, and I can't stay sober off of a spiritual experience I had 25 years ago. Where I really believe that this is a circular process, and that a lot of what we're going to do now. But when I talked about how we're going to bounce around this a little bit, because rather than going completely technical on the fourth step, I want to talk about a little bit about why we're doing it, because it keeps going back to, this, how free do you want to be? It's funny, I talked about Chris, as I used to say I wanted to carry Chris around the workshops with us and just put him in a little playpen over here, and as an extreme example of self-will run riot, so where you could just occasionally go, hey Chris, tell us what you're thinking about. And he goes, well, I'm thinking about how I got screwed around on this deal at work yesterday. But I got a couple of guys here that would give him a run for his money, and it's funny because when I was talking to Rick when we were doing this third step deal, it's one of my favorite lines. He said the first time he saw this thing about being an extreme example of self-will run riot, he said he thought, well, that is one part of this book that I can just skip right over because I am the most generous guy you'd ever hope to meet, and that sort of thing, So it's like, and we see it all the time. But what we're looking at, is I want to go back to 64, because remember on 60 it said the first requirement is that I be convinced, and look at what it says in here. It says, middle of the page. First we searched out the flaw. I don't get it. What am I looking for? And then we go, well. So we're going to consider self's common manifestations. Look at what it says on 64 there. It says, being convinced that self was what had defeated me, we considered self's common manifestations. That's the last line of this. And so we got this guy going, what am I looking for? And we go, well, we're going to consider the common ways that self shows up. And it says, well, resentment is the number one offender as a manifestation of self. Because it's funny, when we start looking for self, my buddy Jeff, who moved to Dallas, he talked about one time, he says, if I go out into the woods out here, I might see a couple of birds, and I might hear a couple of other birds and stuff like that, but a trained bird watcher could go out into those same woods, and he's going to see 18 different birds, and he's going to hear, I think that's a tufted titmouse over there, or something like that. This is one of my favorite bird names. Because I'm 12, because they're trained to watch for birds, they know what to look for. They know, and it's the same way in this looking for manifestations of self. As you get into the process, you start seeing it in everything, and it starts. So we're going to look at. It says, being convinced that self was what had defeated me, we considered self's common manifestations. Because I came from a school of AA that you only do one inventory. My first sponsor said you only do one fourth-step inventory. They used to say stuff like, if you do more than one inventory, you're just bragging and stuff like that. And it's true that if you do a thorough fourth-step inventory and do an efficient evening review and 10th step every day of your life as you go through, and then take those into consideration. You could never have to do another thorough 4-column inventory again for the rest of your life. And if you do that, we will build a statue in your honor in front of the General Service Office, because most of us could tell you a couple of things that bug me, or a couple of things I'm afraid of, so when I go back and do an inventory now, it's not like Katie said, it's not like I'm going back and doing 17 pages of resentments again, and the stuff. I might have 4 resentments or 2 resentments or half a dozen fears, and so this thorough house cleaning becomes more of a process. But when she said if it's been more than 3 months since you wrote a 4-column inventory, I'm sitting there going, Let me think. Yeah, but I did. I just did one. Just one. I'm in under the wire. Yeah, I'm under the wire. But when we start looking at these, it's funny because one time, well, we'll get to that in the fifth step, but I want to talk a little bit about this life. Now we're on this fact-finding, fact-facing mission. I love what Katie says about fact-finding, fact-facing mission. Now I've started seeing that when I'm hearing inventory, when I'm doing a fifth step with somebody, I really feel like my job is the fact-finding. And their job is the fact-facing. So like Katie was talking about, when you're reading inventory to me now, I'm taking an active role. There was a time when I thought my job in hearing inventory is just sit there and listen to you read your fourth step to me. And I don't, there's more to it in the fifth step. But now when I'm on this fact-facing mission, now I'm sitting there and I'm listening to people and I'm going, okay, now where were you living and what was the situation like? And it's like being a news reporter where you start building a take on what's going on in this guy's life. And, and when we talk about the resentment inventory, one of my favorite examples was this guy named Roy and the power of this process, because Roy came to my house one time and because, when we're talking about this thing about how sometimes the therapeutic approach to something is not always what's best for us, because if I'm not careful, and you tell me, well, that's a toxic environment for you and you need to detach and set a boundary there and stuff like that, and I can just boundary myself right out of my whole life, because next thing you know, I don't have to deal with anybody and I just play with new friends because I'm mad at the old ones and stuff like that. So anyway, Roy comes to me one time and we're doing the inventory. One of my favorite things to hear in the fourth column is when they go, oh my God. Because Roy comes to me and he says, my dad. And then, what's the cause? Well, he says, when I was about 12, I was sitting on the front steps of my house. And my dad comes home and he walks by me. As he walks by me, he says, your mom killed herself today. And then he walks into the house, and everybody's like, oh, my God, how could anybody be that thoughtless? How could anybody be that cruel and this and that? And we could process that whole thing. But I'm like, we're going to take a little bit different take on this, so because when we get to, after we've done the first three columns of I'm mad at my dad, here's what he did, here's how it affects me, there's this little column that whatever you want to call it, that I call the sick man exercise. It's at the bottom of page 66. And after we've written the first three columns in inventory, it talks about how they're going to kill me. But then what are we going to do about it? It says, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. Here's a killer one from that old dictionary. Disney coined the term brainstorm, a bunch of people getting together and thinking the stuff up. But if you look it up in that old Webster's dictionary that we use, you know what it says for brainstorm? It says a sudden and violent mental outburst. What? So now brainstorm is more like rage, and it's saying that being grouchy and rageful is not for us. They may be the doubtful luxury of normal men, but for us, these are poison. Now here we go. It says, we turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at this list from an entirely different angle. And when the guys are reading inventory, I'll stop when we get to this point and go, are you ready to look at this from an entirely different angle? And generally they'll go, yeah, I am, because this resentment's killing me. And it says, we began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. That's really not that big of a problem, because the only thing bothering me is the world and its people. Other than that, that's Katie's line, and I love it. But I mean, when the world and its people are really dominating me, and it says, we see that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We couldn't wish them away any more than alcohol. Over and over in the book, what it's going to do is it's going to bring me to an awareness of something that's a problem. It's going to say, okay, here's the problem. Do you find it objectionable? Oh, bad news. You can't do a darn thing about it. Over and over, you got to go to God with it. It does it with alcohol. Now it's going to do it with resentment. It says we couldn't wish them away any more than we could alcohol. And it says, this was our course. Here's what we do. It says, we realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Sometimes I have to look at it and go, a spiritually centered person can't exhibit the behavior of this person that I described in column 2. And for a lot of us, it's not that hard to get to spiritual sick with somebody. It says that we didn't like their symptoms, which is column 2. or the way they disturbed me, which is column 3, they, like ourselves, were sick too. It's not this, oh, bless their pointed little head type of compassion we're talking about. What if now we're talking about two people that are trying to get through this life the best they can with the amount of tools they have, and it says we ask God. You hear a lot of stuff in the rooms about praying for the person you resent. It's not a bad exercise, and it's in from one of the stories in the back, but that's not what it's talking about to do here. It says we ask God to help us. Show them the same tolerance, compassion, or pity, and pity there means more like compassion, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Then he goes on to say we avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. Why? Because it upsets me? He says, no, because if we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. If I wear out this guy at the meeting that ain't doing like I think he ought to be doing, I'm not the guy he's going to come to when he needs help. It says if we retaliate or argue, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We can't be helpful to all people, but how's this for a promise? But at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each other. And that's this little spiritual exercise that is wedged cleverly between the third column and the fourth column of an inventory process that I missed for a long time. And it moves me spiritually into a place of being able to look at this stuff from an entirely different angle in the fourth column. And I'll go back to my example with Roy. He had the first column, my dad, he told me about my mom, that affect my self-esteem, my personal security, my pride, my ambitions, everything, and I said, okay, now in the third column I go, I said, Roy, tell me a little bit about you. Where were you growing up? And he goes, we were in this little town. And he goes, and what'd your dad do for a living? Well, I said, how many kids were in your family? He said, 3. And I said, now where were you in that group of kids? He said, I was in the middle. And I said, and how was the money situation? What'd your dad do for a living? He goes, well, he was a welder. He says, we weren't like rich, but we were fine. We were doing okay. And I said, so your mom has had significant mental illness over the years. There's been a lot of drama around your mother with the family and that sort of thing. And he said, yeah. And I said, and now on this day, she has successfully killed herself. I'm not sure what's happened in the past, but she has killed herself on this day. Now think about your dad is a welder. I said, you were 12, so let me guess. I'm guessing your dad's in his mid-30s. And he goes, yeah, that's probably about right. And I go, so now your dad's got to leave his job as a welder. You're in this little town in Texas. He's got to come home, and he's got to plan a funeral. He's got to notify all the kinfolk that his wife has committed suicide. He's got to plan a funeral. He's got to tell all the people in this town that you live in and risk the judgment of all the people that live there. And in the meantime, in the middle of all this, he's got to figure out how he's going to make a living and raise 3 children.
3 boys.
3 boys. And I said, and is it possible that given his background and the amount of dealage that he had at hand, is it possible that when he walked by you that day, the best he could come out with was your mom killed herself today? And he walked back into the house. And Roy goes, oh my God. I never thought for a second about my dad. I've never given one thought to what was going on with him. All I could think about was me and me and me. And he says, I've been waiting 40 years for my dad to come apologize to me. He says, I need to go find my dad tomorrow and make amends to him. That's the power of this sick man exercise, is over and over and over again in the inventory process. We come in with a resentment, we process it through this process, we see it from an entirely different angle, and we come out the other end. We come in with a resentment, we go out the other end with an amends to go make. And I see it happen over and over and over again. It's happened with one of my brothers that's here.
And about how he made his dad pay.
Well, the other thing was he made his dad pay that whole 40 years. He'd see his truck in town and kick a dent in the door, or, it was just different things, because he felt like his dad had it coming. you can imagine how systemic that was in their relationship. And I had a guy I was working with out of California one time, and we're doing the inventory. And when I talk about how I love to hear him in the fourth column go, "Oh my God." This guy was with his dad, and he goes, "My dad was never there." And as it turns out, his dad was always there. He just, I go, his dad ran a grocery business, but he's home every night. And he's coaching the baseball team, and he's doing all this stuff. And I go, "Your dad was always there." I go, "Is it possible that he just wasn't there enough for you, this little black hole of emotional need, that would pounce on him the moment he comes in the door, and Dad's just going, 'Oh, for God's sake, can I just have 10 seconds of peace?' Dad, 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 and then when we get to his girlfriend, and the fourth column happens the same way. And when we get to his mom, we do the sick man exercise and the same thing. And he's going, "Oh my!" And about the third one in a row, he goes, "Charlie, I'm really a pretty good guy. It's like, people like me. It's like I'm looking like a real jerk in this fourth column here." And I was like, "I ain't mad at you, But what we got to be careful of is what Katie's talking about. Is I go from self-righteous over here in this first column to when you create a chink in the armor, and I start seeing it from an entirely different angle. In the fifth step, it says we avoid worry, remorse, and morbid self-reflection, because what happens is I go from over here to now I'm just consumed with what a turd I am and how I barely deserve to draw air, and the ego is just as happy as long as you're obsessed with yourself. It doesn't care whether I'm thinking a lot of myself or I'm thinking a little of myself. As long as I'm thinking about me, the ego's like, we can still do our best work with that. But what happens, man, you talk about a game changer when we start looking at these manifestations of self. See, the problem with me, when I was out there and I hit the wall at 2.5 years, and I hit the wall at 4.5 years, and I hit the wall at 7 years, and when I pulled away and I kind of went in more, and I thought, you know what, I've tried AA your way, and I'm getting knocked to the mat every time I step in the ring, and I started kind of doing things more my way. The problem was I didn't have anybody in my life saying, "Charlie, you're not running up against the failure of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're running up against the failure of self-will." This is what it looks like when you, as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, are trying to run your life. We call it the second surrender, because the first surrender is the surrender to drugs and alcohol or whatever sent me crashing and burning through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that one, it's fairly easy to surrender when a gorilla's got his foot on your throat, But this second surrender, for a lot of us, usually comes after we've tried running this deal sober for a while. And so when I hit the wall, and boy, you talk about a game changer. I mean, if you'd asked me what happened in my first marriage, in my first inventory, I would have told you she cheated on me. Well, it wasn't my first inventory after that divorce. If you'd asked me what happened in that marriage, I would have told you she cheated on me, and I don't roll like that, and you can get plenty of support for that in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you shouldn't have to deal with it, blah, blah, blah. If you ask me now, there's a very good chance that I would say I exhibited a level of selfishness and self-centeredness in that marriage that would have driven anybody out the door. And now all of a sudden, my problems are of my own making. The biggest movement we can take with a new guy is from going from my problems are coming at me to my problems are coming from me. And that's a whole different level of work there, because all of a sudden, I mean, I was out, and we got so many stories about this, but I was out in Idaho, that same one where the guy said this guy's wife did a hour-long workshop. I was with it was a men's conference, so I took a sponsee with me, this guy named Jay, and we went out to do this conference. And now, if I have a short window of time to work with a guy, a lot of times if it's the host, they send somebody to pick you up at the airport, and it was like an hour and 30-minute drive to where the event was. And we're going to go to pages 60 to 63. If I'm going to get significant movement out of a guy, or a lot of times it's really wonderful to have when a guy comes. Guys come to me a lot, and they either go, "I had X amount of time and I got loaded," or I had X amount of time and I had knee surgery. I had X amount of time and I had back surgery, or I had this much time and this happened, and then or sometimes I get people that will come to me and say, I got 16 years and I'm not doing very good. And it's really powerful to be able to tell that guy that there's more available as a result of this process. But so we're riding with this guy, Brian. And as we're going along, I'm pounding 60 to 63 and selfishness and self-centeredness and a whole new perspective and that sort of thing. And we get to where we're going, and there's this, these were good boys. These guys, this was a good crew, because what they would do on Fridays was they would cook lunch over at this guy, at Ben's house, and they'd invite the new guys over, feed them, and then knock the hell out of them with the big book, and it's... And it's a solid plan, and so we're over there, and they've got lunch and everything, and we're all sitting around, and I know this guy's sponsor, Ben. I've known him a long time, and Brian is the guy that has picked us up at the airport, and Brian starts talking. Katie talks about how you just let us run for a minute and we'll step on our own tail, and so Brian is talking. He's talking about. He goes, "Oh, my first wife. My God, she was nuts, and she was just insane." And then, as the story develops, he says, "And my second wife, wow, boy, was she crazy." And then he says, "Now this chick I just broke up with about 4 months ago. Holy cow! We're talking about riding on the hood of the car, holding on to the windshield wipers, and he's talking, like guys do." And I go. And we talk about the path of consideration, and a lot of times if you come at me with something, you have to get around my ego. So in this path of consideration, we start things off with like, is it possible that, or I'd like to offer for your consideration that maybe. So anyway, and we're sitting there, and I'm listening, and I go, "Hey, Brian, you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?" And he goes, No, go ahead. I said, "How do you find yourself in a relationship with all these crazy women?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, were they crazy when you met them? Or," it gets good, I said, "or is it possible that the only difference between the way they were when you met them and the way they were when you broke up with them was the effect of spending this amount of time with somebody as selfish and self-centered as you are?" And his sponsor's sitting behind him, and his sponsor goes, "Say that again." But it's a complete game changer, because now I'm not just this poor victim of people that I need to detach from. Yeah, and because the other one you'll hear is, after your seventh marriage, they'll go, "Well, you got a broke picker." Like, well, I don't know. So it's a different perspective on what's causing all these problems. And the funniest thing about that was we go get in the car afterward, and I'm with Jay. And as soon as we close the doors to the car, Jay goes, "Dang!" And I go, "What?" And he goes, "My God, man." He goes, "We've been here like an hour, and you're just like, boom!" And I said, "Well, that's my job, man. I'm the out-of-town guy. I fly in, drop bombs, go home." Oh my God! But we're talking about a whole different level of what we're looking for in this resentment inventory. Because my first inventory was basically a confession of things I felt bad about, and it's not a terrible exercise. But now, if we're seeing, we've pounded 60 to 63, and we're talking about how selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of the problem, and then in these inventories, we're talking about how does self show up. And I've had a lot of people come to me and say, "This has changed," because for me, it changed my whole program. It changed the way I sponsor people. It changed what I'm listening to in inventory. It changed what we do in the 10th step. It changes why I'm out making amends and that sort of thing. And we can really get hung up on this, but it says, referring to our list, we putting out of our minds, this is middle of page 67, the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. See, now we're ready after that third column, the sick man exercise. I'm looking at it, my own mistakes. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened? I've written down inconsiderate. Now here's something. One time in the 10th step, I called up Mark Houston, and I said, "Mark, I'm getting nervous." I said, "In the 10th step, it says, were you selfish, dishonest?" And I said, "I'm not." And then when we talk about dishonesty, every day I say no. Were you no? Were you just no? Were you no? And I go, it seems to me that they wouldn't have put it in there if it's never going to come up for me. And he says, "Well, there's 3 forms of dishonesty." said, okay, go, keep going. And he goes, well, there's lying. All right, see, that's what I was putting down. I just wasn't lying to anybody straight up. And then he goes, then there's lying by omission. Oh, now lying by omission is where I tell you the story. I can shape a story without actually lying, but you might come away with a different impression of the truth than what is actually. Like it could be something as simple as, "Did you mail that check yesterday?" You go, "Yeah, yes, I did." Well, I mean, it's on the front seat of my car, and I'm going to mail it, right away. Or, if you at one time, Katie misses nothing, and it's unbelievable, and like I had some of you. I think Polly, you remember when I was in that boot at the International in San Antonio? I've had one bout of gout in my life. And we were in San Antonio at the International, and I can't walk. I can't stand the weight of a bed sheet on this foot. And I mean, they put me, and we go to this doctor, and we barge our way into this doctor's office in San Antonio because the Parkers have rolled into town, and with their prodigious self-will. And this doctor's talking. He's a young guy, and he says, "Do you have diabetes?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he goes, "Have you ever had gout?" I go, "Damn it, man." I go, "My wife is sitting right there." I'm like, "Are you going to run through the whole fat guy list of ailments?" I mean, like I don't get enough grief already. It's like, no, I don't have diabetes. I've never had gout. And so I won't even let him treat gout, and it turns out it was gout. But because the sad thing was I limped around that whole International. And when I got home, this one doctor knew how to deal with alcoholics. He goes, "Well, how about this, Charlie? How about if we just treat gout and see what happens?" And I take like 2 pills and it's gone, and so he gave me these pills, and they were sitting at the counter in the bathroom. And one day I was starting to feel a little twinge in my foot, because but I eat terrible all the time. But I feel a little twinge in my foot, so I open the bottle and I take like half of one of those pills and I pop it, and then I put the bottle right back where it was. And the next day we're in the bathroom and we're standing there, and Katie goes, "Did you take one of those pills?" And I went, No. Well, I took half one. And she goes, "Did you just lie to me?" And I went, "Well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings." No, I said I didn't want to worry you. Now, see, Katie talks about this list that we men work out of, So it's like, yeah, I didn't want to worry you. But not wanting to worry Katie was like about number 7 on the list of why that lie flew out of my mouth. The truth was I didn't want any accountability for the way I'd been eating. I don't want to hear a bunch of crap, and that's what, and I didn't want to worry you, but I want to pull out the shiniest motive, first, So that's lying by omission, and then the third form of dishonesty that he talked about was delusion, and he said delusion is where I'm lying to myself. It's not the mistake. It's not the stuff. It's the stuff that I'm sure of in my life that just ain't so. That really causes me problems. And now when we start talking about delusion, now there's some meat on the bone in that 4th column, because I work with delusion all the time now under dishonesty. One time I was doing an inventory on this sponsee, and I'm mad at X. Why? Because, well, he's self-obsessed. He interrupts me all the time. He talks all the time. And when I'm talking, he doesn't listen to me. When I give him instructions, he doesn't do it. He'll schedule work and then not have it ready when the time is ready for us to do it. And a few other things, right? And then how does it affect? Well, it affects my self-esteem, my security, my ambitions, this and that. And I do the little sick man exercise on him. And then I'm sitting there and I go, under dishonesty, I go, "Charlie, this is me talking to me, is it possible that it's a little delusional to expect this new guy not to act like a new guy?" It's like what you put down in the 2nd column is the description of a newcomer. It's like unless you're expecting a better class of newcomer to start coming through the doors, this is what you're going to deal with. And so who's the one who's had the spiritual awakening here? Is it delusional on your part to not think we're going to have to get this guy? I'm expecting him to have a spiritual awakening before he's been through the process, and so that's what I have to go to my sponsor with and ask God to remove it and that sort of thing. Anything more on resentment?
I think you got to fly through fear.
Okay, I'm going to fly through the fear inventory. Bottom of 67.
Oh, are you going to do this fear?
Absolutely. Here comes the fear sphere. Notice that the word fear is bracketed along the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer. This short word, fear. Now, why are we going to talk about fear? Remember what we're doing in the inventory process? We're looking for the common manifestations of self. So we've looked at how self shows up in the resentment inventory, and now we're going to look under fear as a manifestation of self. This whole inventory process is looking at the ways self shows up. It says, notice that the word fear, this short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. Fear set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? One time, we've had some moments at Primary Purpose Group with the dictionary, and one time we're sitting there, and I am a competitive shotgun shooter, and I've talked to a couple other guys here that shoot and stuff, but Katie and I both shoot clay targets a lot, and I figure I know what shot means. I've got to, when it says the fabric of our existence is shot through with it, I have this image of a piece of coarse, like burlap, that's been shot through with fear. Well, one day we're at Primary Purpose Group, and I was chairing the meeting, and the dictionary guy sitting right here, and we read that line, the fabric of our existence was shot through with it. And I said, just out of nowhere, I said, look up shot. And he looks up shot in this 1936 Webster's Dictionary that we have there, and it says, a method of weaving using weft and web where the fabric takes on a different appearance depending upon the viewpoint of the observer. We call it a Cheech and Chong moment, where the whole group went, whoa. Because now, and look, somebody brought me an example of it. It's a piece of fabric that looks different depending upon the angle that you look at it. So now not only is the fabric of my existence shot through with fear, but it can also change the way I look at things based on how I'm looking at it. So it says the fabric of our... Now, it goes on to say, we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. One of the reasons I say buy the CDs is because one time I remember hearing this in a workshop that Bob D had done, and I'd never heard it before. This stealing never made sense to me. Fear ought to be classed with stealing. I'm like, what? And he explained this one time, and I heard it on the CD, and I was going, my God, I was sitting right there 5 feet away from him when he said it, but I was thinking about sandwiches or something, And he says, right here, it says, we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. And he told this story about this old-timer that was dying in the hospital. And he said, Bob, when you look back over your life, he goes, it's not the mistakes I made that I feel so much regret about. He said, it's the things I was afraid to try. And in that way, fear robs me of the experience I might have been able to have. It robs me of the job I might have been able to get, the relationship, the way I show up in a relationship because of my fear of whatever, all these different things that I was afraid to try. And in that way, fear robs me of the experience that I might. Does that make more sense about this? It ought to be classed with stealing? Well, now, the way I see the fear inventory is there's only 2 columns, maybe 3 in it, and it says right here, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So my first column is I write down all my fears, and then it says we asked ourselves why we had them. And I'll let guys go home and do that. But then when we come back, here's the answer. It says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance, if you turn it around, is reliance upon self. So it's saying I can't be in self-reliance, and I can't experience the failure of self-reliance unless I'm in self-reliance. So when I get scared, that's a red flag for me that I'm in self-reliance. I've slipped back in I'm edging God out of the picture. And the sad thing for me is that the heavier the project, the more I default to self-will. Right? And so if when we're talking about big money or big stuff or what's going on with my kids and that sort of thing, I got this, and it's saying self-reliance failed me. Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other problem. And I have to ask myself, is that true for me? There's one of those statements we turn into questions. I got 1 minute. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so, for we're now on a different basis. The basis of trusting and relying upon God, right? See, remember over at the beginning of the third step, we were on the basis of self-will. Now we're on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. And it says on that we are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. And then it goes on to talk about faith. But it says, we let God... Well, the thing I never understood about fear, and this drives Katie crazy, which makes me really enjoy it. One of the things that I do in a fear inventory with a guy is we sit down and he writes down all his fears, and I talk about, the problem with the failure of self-will is I have this little fear of things that I have control over in my life, and it may be much smaller than I think it is. But like Lorenz one time go, what exactly is in the sphere, because there are things in here like what I'm going to have for lunch or, these sorts of things, and I can control a few things in my life on self-will, but there are things that are on the basis of self-will that are outside the sphere of my control, and they scare the crap out of me. If my whole life is based on self-will, I know at some level that cancer is above my pay grade, or how my kids are going to turn out, or what Katie's going to think of me, or whether anybody at the AA club is going to talk smack about me, or, how much money I'm going to make this year, or those sorts of things, who's going to die, who's not going to die, all those things are outside this little sphere of control. I call it the fear sphere, and it drives Katie crazy. But every time when I do a fear inventory with somebody, a lot of times I'll go down the list and I'll go, okay, this item, this fear you wrote down right here, is that inside your area of control or outside your area of control? And they go, it's outside. This one here, outside. This one here, outside.
So then what do we do with that after you've done that?
Well, we work a program on it, honey. She acts like we're going to just stop right there. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to gain evidence on the failure of self-will there. It's a whole different thing to go, these things that I'm afraid of are because of I'm running on self-reliance. Thank you for your input, though,
You're
honey.
welcome.
We just go, duh, I guess I'm scared. No, we're going to bring God into it after that, because the opposite of self-reliance is this God-reliance. And it says, just to the extent that we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on God, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. And I'm going to end with this one thing. We were listening to Sandy Beach talk. God bless Sandy Beach. And we were listening to Sandy talk about this one day, and he was talking about taking things to God and that sort of thing. And right when he was talking, there was a part of my brain that went to, well, yeah, that's, fine with your problems, but I got serious stuff going on here. And at the moment I had that thought, he goes, I got to put this into practice last year when my daughter was brutally murdered. And you're like, whoa. He just dropped the ace of spades into the middle of the table. And he said, as soon as it happened, he told myself, he went straight to God and said, God, this is not going to affect our relationship. And I've had some situations pop up in my life. I had my biggest customer hired my best crew to come work for them. So I lost my best crew and my biggest customer in one day. And when it happened, I knew immediately that if I don't go to God with this one right now, this one could swallow me up. Mm-hmm. And it was a whole different level of playing the game, because, it was just like, God's either everything or He's nothing. We're going to be, and everything's been fine. But I've had to write more than one 4-column inventory on it. But we've talked about resentment as a manifestation of self. We've talked about fear as a manifestation of self. And when we come back, we're going to talk about manifestations of self when the sexual instinct is aroused. And then we're going to roll through the rest of the program this afternoon. We got a 1-hour lunch break. Thanks, guys.
Be back in here at 1. We need more.
Okay. Hi, y'all. Katie Parker, alcoholic. I am going to hit the 4th column, and then I'm going to talk about the sex inventory, and then it says we need an overhauling here, and the word overhaul means thorough examination. We are so screwed up in that area. And so we're going to talk about, that's what I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to hand it over to Charlie, and he said he promised me he'd be brief on talking about 6 and 7, and then I'm going to go into 8. Yes, you can do that joke. Okay, the other thing is let me think what I was just going to say. The vigorous course of action, yada, yada, yada. Oh, I forgot. Oh, 4th column. And the vigorous course. Thank you. It came to me. When we're talking about urgency, and I'm telling you, we don't want to say that people are doing it wrong. I get it. I mean, we've all done it all kinds of ways. But I want to emphasize that if you study the literature, it is all about urgency. There is nowhere in there where it says chill out. This is all about, you bring the new guy in, and you don't assume anything. If he's gone to treatment, doesn't matter. You don't assume anything. And then you take him and you give him a fatal dose of alcoholism, which takes about an hour. And as it says, the first 7 pages of Working with Others, let your man go home, read the book. Tell him to read the book. If you want to take your sponsee through line by line, admirable. Not what the book tells you to do. As a matter of fact, if you do that, you risk a lot of, it's too much time. We can only meet for an hour twice a week, and to go through the book line by line, by the time you finally get to the action steps, this guy is losing it. He needs to have this spiritual awakening. You want to send him to a meeting that does line by line, great. You want to meet with your sponsees on a Monday night, go through the book line by line, great. But your guy is getting through this work quickly. So after that hour of step 1, then, he comes back to you and he's all in, right? I do barely touch on the 2nd step. I mean, the bottom line is I'm really not that deeply interested in your spiritual take because it can be quite twisted. And we're just not going to, it's just all talk therapy. Once again, we're not having the experience. Then I give them the 3rd step, which takes an hour. I do go through that line by line. And I take them through that thing and I line them out on the 4th step. Now keep in mind, this new guy is going to be calling me every day, sometimes twice a day. So I'm going to have plenty of conversation with him. But after I've done the 3rd step, we've got this guy lined out on the 4th step about the resentment inventory. You have any problems in writing it? Let's talk about it, because I'm lining them out on how to do it. Then I'm talking to him about the fear inventory. A little different than my husband's fear sphere. A lot different than that. Bogus idea. Oh, come on, we're married. It's all in fun. And he loves it. He loves this fear sphere, but I don't. And so then I line them out also on the sex inventory. But keep in mind, I'm talking to him. People will say, that's too much to give them. Well, if you've done it, then I'm interested in talking to you. If you haven't, I don't want an opinion on an experience you haven't had. Right? Line them all out on this, and then when they leave me after doing that 3rd step, I say, look, Saturday in 2 weeks, we're going to meet for 4 hours. Nothing comes between me and that. Right? There's no canceling that appointment unless your kids are sick or you're sick. That's it. Because have you ever had somebody tell you, oh, my sponsee won't write inventory? I don't have that problem. See, that's not an option. I have not done the 1st step correctly if I can't get somebody to write inventory. They don't believe that they have to write inventory. And that's the problem. See, they don't believe that this hopeless state of mind and body. And so I got to go back to step 1 if they won't write inventory. And if they say something like, why do I have to do this? Once again, it's a step 1 problem. And so then when I line them out, I go, look, in 2 weeks we're meeting on the 7th, and it's going to be 4 hours. And after that 4 hours, leave an hour afterwards for the hour that you go home. After we completely finished the, is that one mine? Oh, you just heated it? Okay. I was going to say, is that the one that I got you is what I meant to say, but got it. So, give me a minute.
You line them out, and you're saying if
Here's
you
one.
won't write inventory, it's because I haven't given them instructions.
I got it.
You were about to hand it over to me.
No, I wasn't. So full of it. So after I've finished with the 4 hours, the hour afterwards is the hour in the 5th step, right? As a matter of fact, let's flip to that page, because this page is crucial, and I don't think most people get. Once again, Charlie and I study the heck out of the book, right? That's what our big book study is. For 11 years, line by line, we go through this first 164 pages in the doctor's opinion over and over and over and over. And so the directions are so clear. But in the 5th step, it says... page 75, bottom part, last paragraph at the bottom, everybody at it? Says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. Carefully reviewing what we've done. All right, there, that's an action step. We're going to review what we've done. I hope you've written on that inventory, right? And it says, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Stop there. That's another action step. It's not just a thanks, God. It's a real, sincere, intimate, personal relationship we're trying to create. And then it says, taking the book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. And, Charlie's got a line on that one. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we've asked if we've omitted anything. So the first 5 proposals are the first 5 steps. And we're looking at each one of these. We're taking them in every implication. Do I believe the allergy? Do I believe this mental obsession? Do I believe there is a blank spot, right? That mental blank spot. I mean, I'm telling you guys, the first step, we all drank differently. That's why not always about the drinking is related to the woman who sat at home and drank wine only all by herself is going to be totally different to the guy who's been arrested 4 times in complete blackouts. We got to understand, we all drank different. That's why the book has given us so many different options. We got to get to the allergy. We got to get to the mental obsession. So that's what we're talking about. Do I believe in the 3rd step that I have really quit, that I quit playing God? Okay, what does that mean? Democrat, Republican, no big deal. Try that one on. You know what I mean? Try all of these things on. Doesn't matter. Woman, man, doesn't matter. Gay, not, doesn't matter. Abortion, not abortion, doesn't matter. We don't have a stand on that. Have I ceased fighting anything or anyone? And it says, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Another question. You got an hour to spend on this. This is a lot of stuff. And then it goes through the rest of the questions. Then after you've done the hour, you say ask yourself the questions in the 6th step, right? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we look at step 6. Well, you don't sit on step 6. If you can't answer to your satisfaction, what'd you leave out? Give a quick call to your sponsor. We're moving. This is a vigorous course of action. There's no sitting on 6 and 7. This is a question with a yes or no answer, and you move forward. And then you answer the questions in 6, you say the prayer in 7, and then you make the list in 8. So when you leave, after we've done the inventory, you go home, do the 5th, ask yourself the questions in the 6, say the prayer in the 7, and then you write the 8-step list so the next morning you're making amends. Does that kind of shock you? That's what it tells you to do. There is no stopping. And you know the reason why for that? That's what I think the reason why is because what happens to the ego, all of a sudden you've had this amazing experience in the inventory process. And I mean amazing. You've really seen, my God, how self-centered am I? What I've done. The need for forgiveness. The need to go ask for forgiveness or to forgive. And then if you're not careful, in 2 weeks that window shuts. And all of a sudden you're pissed off at your sister again. Can't believe she said that to you. Your mother, hadn't called me in 2 weeks, because that's what she does. See, there's urgency in this because of the ego rebuilds at such an astonishing rate. And that's why it's a vigorous course of action. I always thought vigorous course of action first was 4 and 5. Then I thought it was 4 through 7. Now the way we study the book, I understand it's 4 through 9. So, having said that, I'm going to talk about the fourth column in the resentment inventory. I do it a little differently than Charlie does it. And remember, we both end up getting to the same place. I'd love to jokingly tell you that mine's deeper and more profound. But I've watched Charlie do inventory and explain it to me, and he has the same experience I do. He just does it a little differently. He uses the sick man prayer deeper, and he doesn't use what I call the expanded third column as much. Now, I'll tell you, the fourth column, I think, is really good. So you're taking the 4 things you're looking for, but my sponsor and I break them down. We break down selfish a little bit more, and we break down dishonest into those 3 places. So once again, this will be on CD because I don't think you'll be able to write as fast as I'm talking, but we want to know self-righteous. Where am I better than in this storyline? See, I need to know how I show up. I don't need to know that I don't even need to know I'm selfish and self-centered. I'm so light years past that. How am I selfish and self-centered? What do I do? I'm telling you what, you come to me, you got no idea what's going on in my mind. You offer me some sort of spiritual literature to read, and I know who you are and what your program looks like. I'm really not interested in your hinky little book, but I'll go, oh, hey. Yeah, I mean, I'm so shut off sometimes with that stuff. I'm amazed by it. But this whole thing is about watching yourself without judgment. I'm not going, oh, Katie, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you're like, no, I'm just observing myself. And one of Charlie's sponsors, loved the guy to death, gave me a book, and he's telling me how special it is. And I'm thinking, that little hinky piece of whatever. And I got it, and I started reading it. Are you with me on that? That attitude? And then I just stopped and I went, wow, God, you're going to have to move me past this one. This has probably got some real depth in it. And I want a better attitude. Book talks about attitude all the time. This attitude is not just a good attitude. This attitude is about really looking at me, really seeing what I bring to something. The minute my mind is shut off to something, I will not learn again. And so I really went with a better attitude, and I've now ordered this book. I've gotten the cliff notes of this book, and I've watched this guy on YouTube because I really believe there's something here. That's why I'm so resistant. So just saying. Then self-reliance, how I run the show. I want to see where I'm self-reliant. Self-pity is the poor me, less than, not fair. Self-seeking, how I make getting my way happen. Self-centered, why you want it to go your way. Why do I need Charlie to behave this certain way in order for me to be okay? Right? I mean, God darn it, if you're having trouble in your relationships, well, let me ask this question. This one is always a mind blower. How many of you guys in this room are currently married right now? Raise your hand. That's okay. Now, if we can remember to do this correctly, if you're with your significant other, now people raise their hand, but not the significant other.
Half of a couple.
Yeah, the half of a couple, raise your hand. So if you're married, raise your hand. Now, if you're with your partner, tell them to put their hand down, one of them. Okay, that's more like a real reading.
Well, that's like a train leaves Chicago.
Well, I know, it's I don't know how to word that, because what happens is it gives a false illusion. If there's nine couples in here, that looks like 18 people are raising their hands. So we're trying to just get the one side. But what you're going to get out of this, and this particular group is a little different. There's more couples in this room, but the majority of people in AA, first of all, if you ask them a question, how many of you guys are married, you get a 10-minute answer. That's a yes or no question. Either you are or you aren't. And now, how many have been married more than once gets a big... How many of y'all have been married more than once? Yeah, that's usually... to start. How about twice? Start to get the wave going on, right? Yeah. And so, but one of the things that I think is so interesting...
I got a broke picker.
Yeah, you got a broke picker, sure. Charlie Charlie could pick the crazy ones, let me tell you. And I had a guy, beeline it up, so looking for, my fault here. And he goes, well, he picked you. And I go, no, he didn't. I picked him. Okay, so let's be sure that we're real clear on this deal. And one of the things that I know, and we laugh about it, we were best friends forever. I mean, neither one of us expected that we'd be together, So, I mean, we're playing and running hard and playing hard. But one of the things that I can tell you is if you're in a marriage, one of the toughest things about staying married, alcoholics don't do it well. Why? Because we are so self-centered. It's already hard enough. But after about 3 years, the shine is worn off. And we think there's something else that's going to come around the bend. And that what we haven't done is the work on what it's like to be with one person and really do that work behind it. Like I said, I hope your significant other makes your evening review every day. Doesn't mean I don't love Charlie, but Charlie's not the problem. You make it every day, honey. I don't know how to say that easily. I know I don't make yours every day, and I wish I did. Because I'm going to tell them now because you opened the door. When we were in counseling, I told the counselor, I said, we have a step that is about, where were you resentful, dishonest, selfish, and afraid, in the evening review. And I told him, I said, I wish I made Charlie's evening review more often because I can tell he's got a low-grade mad at me. I can tell by the way he reacts. Does that hit home to you guys that are married? Where he just snaps you. And you're like, well, that's because you're pissed off at me. Do some work and see that it's not me. I mean, that's why he makes my evening review, because it's not him. Right? I mean, if what I said required a snap like that, that'd be different. And I'd come back and say, you know what, I'm really sorry I said that. I could have done that with more compassion. But the reason we do inventory is not, have you ever had somebody come up to you in AA and they start talking trash about somebody? You go, I know I'm taking their inventory. They go, I don't mean to be taking their inventory. I go, oh, please do. Obviously, you're pissed. I'm going to get you to third and fourth column here in a minute. Go ahead and you've got the second column. That's what it's talking about. If you're angry, you need to write it on paper. It's so important. And I got to tell you, I absolutely love Charlie Parker. Do we have very difference of things? Yes, absolutely. Do things begin to bother me about him? Sure. I mean, I'm in a relationship with another guy. We spend a ton of time together. We shoot together. We travel together. A lot of stuff. Sometimes in an airport, you'll see both of us just go separate ways. We're like, and we'll just, it's like we just need a few minutes in our own corner, That's,
we were walking through an airport one time, and we have a lot of airport stories. And we're walking along, and I'm just gooning along like I got good sense, and I'm walking along, and she's about 40 feet away from me, and I go, Katie, and she goes, and gives it one of those, and I'm like, oh. And so when we get to where we're going, she's talked about this big fight we had in the airport. And I got up after it, and I go, that big fight we had? I said, I didn't even know about it. I was like,
yes, he did. Yeah. I'll get the big laugh, yeah. But and here's the other thing about it, though, because I really believe, I think it's so unfortunate in AA, sometimes in an open discussion meeting, we'll raise our hand and we'll just knock our significant other or knock our children, and that's so not the place. In an AA meeting, we're supposed to be bringing hope and understanding. I mean, the work is between me and my sponsor, and that we come into AA and say, I had a problem with my husband, and what I realized when I wrote the inventory is it was all about my expectations and what I thought, my ambition. I mean, that's really what we're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to raise your hand and go, well, I need to talk about my husband again and leave it here, unfortunately. And I was a big part of that movement. I mean, I did that for many, many years. But today I understand the difference. And one of the other things about this inventory process is the spiritual gift. It says that it holds the key to your future. Do you believe that? I mean, everybody goes, I wish I knew what God wanted for me. Write inventory. It holds the key to your future. He's trying to speak to you, but he can't speak to you if you're blocked with all this stuff. This stuff has got to get somewhere, and I got to get to where, once again, it takes a little bit of time for even the sponsor to understand what we're looking for. It's a moving target all the time. But the other thing, I got to keep moving. Okay, so self-centered. is why you want it to go your way. And that's where in a relationship with especially another alcoholic, it's very challenging for me to realize Charlie's got his own ambitions and I've got mine, and they may not be moving in the same direction. One of the things my sponsor tells me, and God almighty, if you're going to sponsor somebody that's in a relationship, you're going to have a lot of phone calls about that relationship. And the last thing I need is, oh, Katie, just love him. It's like, oh, boy, we're done here. I've worn her out. You know what I mean? I'm going to have to call somebody else. Because you got to get me to, Charlie is scared to death. He's just gone through an incident he may or may not share with you for the last couple of years between business and children that make anybody lose their mind. And I want him through it. Come on, let's get through it. Just do it. Do the work and get through it. You know, I'm the head of the band and moving on, the front of the line. And you know, Marty kept saying to me, Katie, you've got to be praying for Charlie. He's in real trouble. Don't just turn the other cheek and wish he'd get over it. You know, and it's been a lot of work. And then at the very end, she said something so profound to me. She said, we thank Charlie from the bottom of our heart because he's brought you closer to God through all of this. Now, let me tell you, when I'm laying there snot flying, crying, I was like, just stopped me in my tracks. I thought, you know what, you're right. Thank you, God, because this has brought me so close. And I love Charlie to death, and he's gone through a very, very tough time.
It had been 2 years.
It's been 4, but he thinks it's been
15 months.
So, we're not going to argue on that point because I'm over here just praying for him, okay? So, let me move on, because that could get very heated. And so, very quickly, on the sex inventory, the other thing about the sex inventory, remember, the sex inventory, we're not interested in who all you slept with. I mean, come on. If it was consensual sex, so be it. If no one was hurt in consensual sex, we're not about listing, you know, guy with red tie, caterer at the wedding. You know what I mean? I mean, you name it, we women hone in. Always love when the boys are looking around going, was that me? Was I the caterer? You know, we're like, this. We women looked around when we were drinking, we're like, and you're it. Okay, that's good enough. I'm on it. And it's the evening, and then you leave, and I go, okay, I've lost him. I got to get some. Okay, he'll do. All right. And, you know, that's just the process that we went through. We're not interested in that. We're looking at where harm was done. Where did I harm you or others with my sex conduct? And remember, we're not, once again, when we get into the amends process, if somebody doesn't know you existed and you were sleeping with a married man, you don't go make an amends to the wife. Or if, here's the one that kills me, and this is dicey because I've seen it go really well 1 out of 10 times, and the other 9 it go very poorly. And that's why we're always asking God what we should do, is that if you broke up a marriage and the wife knows about you, going to tell her you're sorry is a little hard for somebody to hear. Oh, I'm so sorry you're sorry. Yeah, you slept with my husband. You broke up our marriage. Thank you for coming to talk to me. It can go really well and it can go really poorly. So you got to ask God if you're supposed to be doing that one. I don't know. He's preparing everybody's heart. I can tell you, it can go both ways, and this is going to be between you and your Creator. The sex inventory is a conduct inventory. So it's about me being a neighbor, me being an AA member, me being an employee or employer. How do I show up? Because I can arouse jealousy, bitterness, and suspicion with my sister. You see what I mean? I mean, this is, once we move sex out, because it says it's an emphasis on sex. But if you'll really study it, it's very interesting. It says many of us need an overhauling here. That means to examine thoroughly. We're not to be the arbiter of anybody's sex conduct, but this is the way I read that. So you get to date and do whatever you want with your sex life. Now, let me tell you something. You step too far outside my values, I probably won't sponsor you anymore. There's two things I won't. Well, one thing I definitely won't sponsor you if you have an open marriage. And if you come to me and say, Katie, I have an open marriage and, you know, we sleep with anybody we want to, go, okay, well, you know, more power to you. But I can't sponsor you. That's so far outside my value systems. I don't even know how to have I can't even have a conversation with that. Now, if you're having an affair, I can work with you on that. I get that one. But if you're going to have 3 or 4 players on the field, in an open marriage, I don't know how to do that. And I'm not even really interested in playing in that circus. So that is important for you to understand. If somebody's so far outside your value system, I can't be helpful. Does that make sense? And so when we're looking at this, we're not the arbiter of anybody's sex conduct. So if you're going to be with somebody, I don't get to tell you that he's good, bad, right, wrong. But if it starts to cause you problems, your sex conduct, I get to talk to you about that. I get to start saying, there's some issues that if and this is going to start to get dicey, but I'm just going to barely touch on it. I know, down, Flecka. We women are twisted in this area, and so are you boys. I'm not letting you off the hook, but you're easier for us to manipulate with our sex powers. So you just kind of you took the ether and you just follow along, But what happens is say that there's a lot of sexual confusion in the younger generation, and they can't decide what side of the fence they're on. And sometimes if you come to me and you've got sexual confusion, I will always tell you, if you're going to work with me, you got to be on one side of the fence or the other. I can't be that you're gonna claim to be bisexual. And you're going to play with the boys, and then you get sick of them. You play with the girls, and you get sick of them. You play with the boys, you get sick of. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be in this. I want you to consider that. And if you can't, I'm probably not the girl to work with.
Doesn't mean you're kicked out of AA.
No, I'm not just going to sponsor you because it's too. We're once again we're trimming the branches. Make a decision, and if you can't, I just want you to know I can't work with you. Is that kind of clearer? See, it's an interview process. When somebody says, can you sponsor me? Let's sit down and talk. I'm going to give you the terms of my agreement. And these are my terms. This is what I'm expecting. So Mark used to say, if your sponsee's not doing what you've told them, then you haven't set the agreements down clear enough. See, as a sponsor, I'm running the show. And I just want you to know. Now, that's still loving and kind. And then the 9 questions that I love are, where have I been selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate? I'm interested in where you have been in those. We're going to answer these 9 questions. Whom had I hurt? In a relationship situation, say you got involved with somebody that had kids and you didn't have kids, or you did have kids. You may have hurt the children. There's a lot of people. Say you got really close to his mom. You may have hurt her. There's a lot of people we hurt. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness? Wow. Can we do that easy? We play such manipulative games. I didn't even realize until Charlie had said this to me that some people have an old idea that if I make you jealous, it shows how much you love me. I'd never even really considered that one. Now, I'm capable of it. I don't operate too much in those parameters because I don't really play a lot of jealousy games. But that's an interesting one, and that opened a door for me to work with a lot of people on. Now, I don't think most of us even know we're doing it. This is not like we sit there and rub our grubby little hands together and figure out how we can hurt you. We can do that, but you know what I mean? Most of the time, I'm just doing. And then it says, where were we at fault? Remember, it's never my part. Never my part. Where was I at fault? Where was my harms? Where were my mistakes? And it says, what should we have done instead? And then we write this sane and sound ideal. I'd never even heard of that in the book. I must have just completely missed that part. But this sane and sound ideal for my sex life or my conduct life, to be a better neighbor. Just think about it. What's the worst thing in the world is to hate your neighbor. And you come home to your home and they pull in at the same time and you just hate them. And there's a lot of hate in this room. Don't be fooled that we're all this unhateful group. We can hate deeply. It even says it in our book, we go to the man we hate. I love that because we're capable of it. And so this sane and sound is not writing for me. It wouldn't be writing Mr. Perfect. It's how I want to show up in this relationship. I want to be honest. I want to be sincere. I really don't want to play games, but I can tell you, we all play games, right? I mean, I swear, I used to do this great game with Charlie, and he never knew it until I admitted it. So many times in workshops, he jumped on it and heard it, and then I ratted myself out. I used to think how I could get Charlie, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you men are so easy. You are. You're just so easy. You're like, huh? And we girls were like, and Charlie, I'd want to talk to him about something. And I knew that if I came at him and said, look, I got something I want to talk to you about, he'd, always apprehensive. So instead he'd walk in and I'd go, hey. And he's like, huh? And I go, so what's happening with so-and-so? And it's almost like I just thought of it, right?
You've been laying for me all day.
I mean, I've been just waiting. Okay, he's in the house. It's been about a minute, and do it. Hey!
You ever talk to Sadie?
Yeah, and then he's starting to talk about it, and it's just terrible. I'm not proud of it. But then after he's heard me say it enough in workshops, he picked up on it the time I did it to him. And he goes, I'm on to you. And I thought, good. I needed somebody to pull the plug on that one because I was able to ride that pony for a while. And but the truth is that I now what I love is the more spiritually fit we are. This pause when agitated or doubtful is a gift. And it's about a 2-second pause. And it really is a spiritual gift. That all of a sudden I think, you know what, I want to ask Charlie that question? No. Not good at all. And it's the still quiet voice guiding me. And I'm so fortunate for that. Now, that's not 24/7 every day, but it's more than not. And then it says, if sex is troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into working with others. So I'm telling you guys, when you're having real difficulties in your sex life, your relationship, I wish if we could change a word, I'd say relationship, because that's really more of what it is. Then it would be throw yourself harder. If you're in a breakup, don't sit around by yourself and just cry and cry and cry. Go down to the drunk tank, man. Work with those people. It works when everything else fails. It's a very, very challenging thing when you threaten our sex life. Honey, I really think I do want to go, no, I'll give it to you. So I'm giving you 7 minutes.
Thanks, honey.
Okay. You bet. I'm going to have this just...
Well, we're all over the place now.
I know.
And we cover a lot of ground in these things, and we go back and forth and different things. But I just, it's funny when we start talking. Before I address the 6 and 7, and when we talk that in this inventory process, we're looking for manifestations of self. Well, this is going to keep me busy for a long time. Like the guy that called me. And some of the conversations I've had experiences with guys in the fourth column that are mind blowing, where they, like I had, Rick and I had a very significant experience in the fourth column, and I had a guy in Spain that was like, I've had guys that were considering like violence towards a family member, and seriously, and then we do the inventory, and this one guy, I'll never forget, he got this 1,000-yard stare, and he goes, this changes everything. And I said, I just looked at him, and he goes, so you're telling me I was ready to do this, whatever it was, because of my selfishness? And I'm like, that's what I'm telling you, And he wound up going back and making amends to these people. He went home and fired 2 lawyers that were involved in active lawsuits right then. No, he dropped the lawsuits and then told his lawyers. That's always a real crowd pleaser. He went to the people that he was in lawsuits with and said, you know what, I'm not going to do all this. And the lawyers were like, could have run that by me before you dropped it. But we're talking about real freedom that comes from there. But it's funny when we start. We're going to talk a lot about manifestations of self, and we're going to talk about different things, and we're also going to talk about imperfect sponsorship. It's my firm belief that if a sponsor and a sponsee are both giving it their best shot, God takes up a ton of slack in that relation. Don't wait till you can do this perfectly to start sponsoring people. And one of my Chad, his dad, got real invigorated behind doing step work and doing a lot of this stuff and taking people through the steps quickly. And I love his stepdad, but he's up in Oklahoma. And he's doing this, and he's driving back from a meeting one day. It's one of my favorite stories. He's driving back from a meeting. He's got this good old boy that he's been sponsoring for a couple of years, and they're driving along, coming back from the meeting. The guy goes, "God dang, man!" He goes, "I just feel so good these days." And he goes, "Oh, that's great, man." He goes, "Yeah, I know." He goes, I hardly ever smoke weed anymore. And Hank goes, what? And the guy goes, I know. It's like I never even want to, And Hag goes, oh my God, I'm the worst sponsor in the world. I've been sponsoring this guy for 2 years. It never occurred to me to tell him you can't smoke weed. But I know it's like I never even want to. There's some funny stories that go behind a lot of this stuff, and one of the things that we talk about in the sex inventory, and when we talk about old ideas, it's funny. It says we're not going to be the arbiter of anybody's sex life, but when you start having kids, you hear yourself saying things sometimes. You ever hear yourself as a parent say something and you realize that is straight up BS? What I just said, and it was stuff I heard as a kid. And one of them was one time, how we tell newcomers, don't get in a relationship for the first year you're sober. And so, one time I was sitting out by the pool and we're swimming and then we have lunch. And then my daughter runs up to me after lunch and she goes, Dad, I want to go swimming again. And I go, oh, honey, you can't swim for 30 minutes after you eat or you'll get cramps. And then I hear myself say that, and I go, I don't even know anybody that knows anybody that knows anybody that ever had cramps, And I realized that was just BS that we tell our kids because we just ate and we don't want to have to watch them in the pool, So I can chill for a little while after lunch. I go, oh, honey, you'll get a cramp if you swim in the next 30 minutes. And I said, and I think that's the same reason we tell sponsees don't get in a relationship for the first year. We don't know whether it works or not because nobody's ever done it. But the reason we say it is because if you get in a relationship, my job just got a lot harder, I'm sponsoring you along and everything's at one level. Well, you get in a relationship and now we're talking every day, So it's a lot easier to tell you, don't swim for a half hour before you, that sort of thing. But, I want to talk a little bit more. There's some funny stories about manifestations of self and just the ways that we watch people and the way we sponsor. And like I was saying, man, the first place that self is going to become obvious is in others. You're going to see it in people around you. You're going to see it in a home group. You're going to see it in stuff like that. And, like one of the things in the home group is you'll see two people can be involved in a heavy conversation and maybe one of them's crying, and I'll walk right up into the middle of it and go, hey, what are y'all talking about? And so it's like, not only do I want to barge into the middle of the conversation, but I kind of need you to stop and bring me up to speed on what you're talking about. I mean, does that seem a little self-centered? But I wouldn't see that, and the other one we talk about a lot as a manifestation of self-centeredness. Now, you'll have some fun with this one. This is what we call story stealing. And story stealing is where you start to tell a story, and your story reminds me of one of my stories, and my story is way more interesting than your story. So I just come right over the top of your story with my story, and we call it, I've stolen your story. Like Katie and I were at a party one time, and this guy comes walking up to me and he goes, hey, Charlie, what's up? I go, oh, not much. He goes, I'm getting ready to go to Costa Rica. And I go, Costa Rica? Dude, I've been to Costa Rica 3 times. One time I went down there where there was 10 of us. We went down there and we stayed at this place called Melia Cariati, and we rented dirt bikes and we rode to the coffee plantations. We went whitewater rafting. We played golf every day and gambling at night and stuff like that. Man, Costa Rica's awesome. And I turn around and I walk away. And this poor guy never got to tell his Costa Rica story because I stole it. Right? And it's rampant. It's not just one up, and this is just. Sometimes we even think we're relating, that I'm relating by telling you my story. But I don't. It's not like I listen and ask a couple of questions and then talk about my story. I'm just coming right over the top. And we were in Vegas one time, and we were talking to this guy, it was in Southern California. And he goes, "Well, I can go on even better than that." He goes, "When somebody starts talking, he goes, I can already tell where they're going and what they're saying. I don't even have to listen to their story. I can just come right in there right there." And I said, "How's that working out for you?" He goes, well, I mean, I spend a lot of time by myself, and I'm really lonely. But so we're watching for story stealing. That's one where you get to throw a flag on the field, with story stealing. And then the first cousin of story stealing, this one goes hand in hand with story stealing, is called having my hand up while you're talking. My daughter taught me this one, and what this one is while you're telling your story, I might as well be sitting there going, because I've already thought of what I'm going to say. Your story has triggered a thought in my brain, and like my nephew, I love him, but I mean, once he puts a thought into the chamber, he can't even look at you until he gets ready to fire that thought. So you'll be talking, and all of a sudden you see him go like this, and he looks on the side, and then as soon as he finishes, he goes, "Yeah, well, one time I was, and so it's like, and there have been times where Katie will be talking at the table, and I'm sitting there, and she'll go, "Put your hand down, honey, I'm still talking," and I don't have my hand up, but I will have air drawn in, and because I'll find myself go like that, because I've already drawn in air, so that if you take a break, I can go, "Yeah, well, one time I was thinking," and I'm way done listening, at that point.
I just wanted to say one thing. Here's what's interesting. We're talking about active listening. This is really a tough discipline.
I'm going to talk about that.
Okay, well then I want to talk about the other thing. So say I got something that's really important to me. Some event just happened, and I tell him the story, and I just know he's going to say, "So, well, what'd they say?" Or anything. And he goes, "Wow, cool." And you're like, okay. And then he goes, I had a sponsor. And then I'm like, I still need just two questions in there. And believe it or not, it's an interesting experience. I mean, both sides to do it and to watch yourself.
We were doing a workshop at Wilson House up in Vermont, where Bill Wilson was born. And it's a very special place. We've done half a dozen workshops up there. And Chris S. from New Jersey comes up to hang out with us, and he drives up from where he lives, and he comes up to me, and we're on a break, and this woman had said, "Katie, can I talk to you during the break?" So we're sitting there, and Katie and this woman are sitting over by the piano, and I'm standing there with Chris, and I go, Chris, come here, check this out. You got to check this out. And he goes, "What?" And I go, "Watch Katie listen." And we look over there, and this woman is talking, and Katie's going, like this, and I go, "I don't know how to do that." And Chris leans over to me and he goes, "I don't even know how to look like I'm doing that." So after that, I decided, I had a guy sitting right at the corner of my kitchen table, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to listen. I'm going to eye contact, and I'm going to listen to the whole thing, and he's talking, and I'm making eye contact, and I'm nodding my head, and I realize I got no clue what he's talking about, because I'm so focused on trying to look like I'm listening that I don't even know how to act, and so, but one of my favorites, and I used to be embarrassed about telling these stories until I realized how much company I have, because one time Katie's doing a workshop and she's talking about active listening, and she goes, Katie's doing a workshop and she's talking about active listening, and she goes, when you're listening to their story, instead of just blurting out the thing you think you're going to, because it is rampant. It's off the chain in my family. I mean, you can't. I love my sister, and I hate giving this line up because for years I've been going around saying my sister would give a woodpecker a headache after about 45 minutes, and it's a good line, but it's just not true. My sister's fine. I'm just intolerant and judgmental, and I have a short fuse, and that's your facilitator up here today, and. Because I realized the other day that she's fine. She's fine. It's just how intolerant I get around her, and with the story stealing. Because you can't get 3 words out before it reminds her of something about her husband, one of her kids, her boss, or something like that. So, like one time, Katie was talking about a story, and she said somebody was talking. I said, "Well, Katie has some experience with that." I said, "Katie, you want to tell that story?" And Katie goes, "Yeah." She goes, this happened after her mother died. You want to tell that story, Katie? And she goes, "Yeah." And Katie goes, "Well, most of my family was from Baltimore." And my sister, out of nowhere, goes, "I don't think I've ever been to Baltimore." And I go, Back to Katie. And, then she pouts, and then, but I mean, I do the same thing, but I mean, it's like, it's just off the chain.
The workshop.
But, so we're doing this workshop, and Katie is saying, I was actually getting back to this one.
Good.
So she says, instead of just blurting out what you're going to say, she goes, listen to what they're saying, and then ask 3 questions. Listen to them tell their story, and then ask them 3 questions, and then you can talk about what you're going to say. We're like, oh, okay, I get it. So in the break, I swear to God, this guy runs up to the table in the break, and he goes, "What are the 3 questions?" And Katie goes, "Well, you big dope. It depends on what you're talking about." And one of my sponsees over there, he goes, "I think half the room was wondering what the 3 questions are." It's like, yeah, it's like, what am I supposed to ask them? So, but I mean, she told me like if I'd have said, "Really, you're going to Costa Rica? Who are you going with?" Really, how long have you been planning this trip? How long are you going to stay there? Are you going, and that sort of thing. Is this something you've wanted to do for a long time? And then I can say, "Oh, I've been to Costa Rica a few times, but I ain't got that in me naturally, So this whole story stealing and I mean, you'll start to have some fun with manifestations of self, but it changes the way I do inventory. It changes the way I do sponsorship. It changes what I'm looking for in myself. It changes what I'm looking for in 10 steps with my sponsees. And I have a meeting at the house every Thursday night. We call the common solution, and we want to be one voice, one message. Whether you're talking to me or Roy or Rick or Todd or Chad or whoever at the table, you should be getting the same message pretty much the way it is. So we meet on Thursday nights and we have dinner, and then we have a meeting. And one time, Todd's a Cajun boy, and he'd come back from southern Louisiana, and he brought back a whole bunch of andouille sausage. And you've heard me talk about Chris, and you'll see why I love Chris after a while. I mean, because it's just unfiltered, and so we're all getting ready to eat, and I had these big old links of andouille sausage in this pot steaming, and we got red beans and rice and stuff, and it's a big night, and so when I go over and I take the lid off the pot with the sausage in it, and as soon as the steam clears, Chris is standing there with his plate like this. And I just, there's some sponsees that you have to be gentle with, and there's some sponsees that you can't take your foot off of their throat for a second. Rory, I would fall into this category. There's I'm that way. I don't need to be nurtured along. I need constant, I need your foot on my throat pretty much regularly because, otherwise I need to tell you the story one more time. And, but so anyway, Chris is standing there, and as soon as the steam clears, he's got his plate like this, and I go, "Chris, you don't get a whole link." I go, "Look in that pot." I said, "How many links of sausage do you see in that pot?" And he looks and he goes, 9. I said, "How many men do you see in this kitchen?" And he goes, 1. I mean, how do you not love that guy? I wanted to give him a whole link. I was just like, "Here, just take the link for God's sakes." But that I can work with. That I can work with because we're going to talk about. You have sponsors call up and they're so ashamed of what that first thought is. But my default position a lot of times is really, really selfish. I mean, my first thought a lot of times is, how's that going to affect me? If somebody passes away, how's that going to affect me? Somebody, and so there's a lot of, now I don't share that thought, I don't come out with that stuff, but if we're not careful, we'll really beat ourselves up for that first thought. And so, it's a really interesting thing, to give you the level of selfishness that I carry around. I mean, I'm 15 years sober one time. And I walk into there's a big AA club at home. It looks like a country club. It's a long story, but they were given a piece of property and they built a building on it. And it's a big AA club and it's really nice, called the Northland Club. And one day I walk into Northland, and I kind of grew up in and out of Northland. I mean, my home group is Primary Purpose Group now, but still have deep roots at Northland. And I walk in one day, and this guy's standing there in the half measures room, and that's what we call, there's a room between the Al-Anon meeting and the AA meeting, and we call that the half measures room. And I walk in, and there's this guy I've known for a long time, and he goes, "Hey, Charlie, what's up, man?" And I go, "Hey, how you doing?" And he goes, "We need to go back to Vegas sometime." And I go, yeah. And I turn around, and I can still tell you the temperature of the room, the color of the room, because I am horrified, because I have zero recollection of ever being in Vegas with this guy. And he's telling me like we had such a great time, and I got nothing, man. And I've only known this guy sober. I'm 15 years sober, and I'm going, what is he talking about? And then I start searching through my memory, and I realized that at one point there was a trip to Vegas where 4 men went out to Vegas, and we stayed, and we got massages, and we played golf, and we gambled, and we ate, and we went to the gym and all this stuff. But the reason I didn't remember being in Vegas with this guy is because I wasn't in Vegas with this guy. I was in Vegas with me. And this guy was just one of those players on the side. Bob Bazan said that his sponsor told him one time, he goes, Bob, those shadowy figures out there? And he goes, those are people. And he's like, they have lives of their own and concerns and worries. You're like, what? Because that's what, he was just a bit player that happened to be along, and so we'll talk about that in the amends process, because one of the things that's tied to that is part of living a life based completely on selfishness and self-centeredness is I have very little awareness of my effect on the people around me. Right? You ever just look up and somebody is angry or somebody's crying and you're like, what? It's because I'm rolling through like this all the time. There's things that happen when we do when we do the resentment inventory and the fear inventory and then the sex and harms inventory. We've got those 9 questions in the sex inventory that we work with, and then there's some prayers we do at the end of it, and we use most of the instructions we've done while writing the 4th step or what transfers over to the 5th step. There's very little instructions in the book about hearing a 5th step, but there is one, but it does talk about we pocket our prides and go to it, eliminating well, there was one time where I called up a buddy of mine that's a real big book technician, and I said, okay, I've followed the instructions of writing inventory pretty closely. I'm pretty well checked out on how to write a resentment inventory, a fear inventory, a sex inventory. I said, but where is the piece where we ask you, what's the worst thing you've ever done? What's the thing you feel the worst about? What is it, what's the one thing you've decided you're not going to tell me? And it's kind of intuitive, but he said, well, it's in the 5th step. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it says pocket our pride, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. So it's there where we're going to illuminate these things, to shine light upon every. But he said, but so obviously there's more to the 5th step than just listening to this guy read his 4th step. And there have been times where I've been working with guys, and like with Jamie at the very end of it, we're sitting there and I go, that's it? And he goes, yeah, that's it. And I go, nothing else. And he goes, no, that's everything. And I go, it's just interesting. I said, because I know for me, I felt really bad about when this happened. I had this happen in my life and I felt really bad about that. And he goes, there's something else, and so then we talk about that, and we run that through, and then he goes, there's something else. And then we talk about that for a while. Then we finish, and I send him home to do the hour at the end of the 5th step, and he calls me on the way home, and he goes, okay, there's something else. I mean, it's like it talks about how the worst possible things there are the things we want to, the things that are blocking me the most are the ones that I want to hold on to and not talk about. So it's going to require this surrender from the 1st step to get me to the point where I go, if I'm still blocked, I'm in danger here. I've got to talk about these things. And then, okay, so I want to roll into 6 and 7, because the first time I went through the steps, I told you that we did alcoholic, willing to believe, 3rd step prayer. My inventory was just kind of a confession about the things I felt bad about. And then 6 and 7, you just kind of phone those in, and then I'm out making amends and that sort of thing. And now 6 and 7 has taken on a whole new weight for me. And a lot of it started one time. It's funny how God works. Lorenz is the closest I have in my life these days to Mark Houston, as far as the depth of spiritual nature that he takes it to. And we were at a conference. There's these conferences, Polly's done a million of them. They call these Woodstock formats, where instead of telling your story, they bring in popular speakers and they have you to have a step, So like, Katie might have step 3 and I might do step 1 or I might do step 4, and they call it a Woodstock format. They're really cool. And, but anyway, so they're getting ready to have one, and the guy says to Katie, he says, Katie, we'd like for you to do steps 6 and 7 next year. Now think about this. Imagine that there's this big conference coming to town, and they go, "Hey, would you like to speak at the conference?" And you're like, "Yes, I would. Yeah, I'd really like that." And they go, "We'd like for you to do an hour and 10 minutes on 6 and 7." Most of us are going to run out of bullets after about 10 minutes, I mean, and so anyway, so Katie comes out and she's talking to Lorenz. And then she goes back in there and she says, "I'm really a lot better at 3. I like to do step 3." So I said, "Okay," because she had told Lorenz, "I'm really worried about doing 6 and 7." And she went back in and says, and so she comes back out and sits back down with Lorenz, and she goes, "I told him I'd rather do 3, so he put me on step 3 instead of 6 and 7." And Lorenz goes, "Oh, that's too bad." He said, "It would have been interesting to see where God took you with 6 and 7. So she marches back in there, and now she's a producer of confusion rather than harmony, and says, "Give me 6 and 7 back." So it kind of set us both on a track of what would you talk about in 6 and 7, because I'd never really spent a lot of time in 6 and 7, and I'll tell you what I've come up with, and it's taken such a huge role when we talk about this. Year and a half, I've really been through a tough spot, and I hit a wall that I'm not really quite comfortable talking about it yet. I'd like to be a little further on. This stuff's easier to talk about when it's in your rearview mirror than when it's on your windshield. But I went through a year about the end of 16, the beginning of 17. It was just really, really tough, and there was pregnancy and alcoholism and suicide and business and all those things seemed to me like things that I could handle on my own. It felt like on self-will I could be able to handle these things individually, but when they came at me collectively, I was over my head long before I knew it. Next thing you know, I've gained about 60 pounds and I don't even know what's going on. So that's some of what she's talking about, and a lot of this stuff is I've had new experiences in 6 and 7 with it, because what I've come up with in 6 and 7 is now. This fourth column, I have real stuff that's just come out of inventory. Where have I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened? How do I show up? How do people experience it? How did I set the ball rolling? What did I do? Where was I delusional and all that stuff? And I've just had my face rubbed in my level of self-centeredness for about 4 hours, and I've got real stuff now coming out of that inventory to take to God. And so what the thing is, the way I look at it, to me, there's 4 things going on with 6 and 7 that have really taken on a lot of significance to me. The first thing is this thing we're dealing with, is it objectionable to me? It says these things which we have admitted are objectionable on page 76. Thank you. It says, well, now we've done that hour at the end of the 5th step, and man, I could send you a talk that Mark did at the hour at the end of the 5th step. All I can tell you is Mark went on a rant at the kitchen table one time about this hour at the end of the 5th step, and then Chad is looking at Mark, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at Mark, and he's looking at me like, "Are you getting this?" And later, Chad told me, he goes, "I think I heard about 10% of what Mark was saying there that day, and that 10% revolutionized that hour for me at the end of the 5th step, where now that becomes a real piece of business, where I'm going to the end of this thing and I'm running through the first 5 steps in all their implications. Do I believe I'm bodily and mentally different from my fellows? Do I believe the only solution I have is a power greater than myself and a relationship with that power? Have I made this decision in the 3rd step? Do I really believe that selfishness and self-centeredness are the root of my problem? Have I carried that into looking at the ways it shows up in the 4th step? And do I believe that resentment is the number one offender? Am I a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Am I a victim victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction. We're running through the whole first thing of the book, and then when we come up to it in the fifth step, it says, if we, have I done the work so far? Are these things real to me? Are they not just academic exercises, but is this stuff in the core of my beliefs now? Am I, painfully aware of what the real problem is starting to look like? And it says if we can answer it or satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness. Are we now ready to let God remove from us these things which we have admitted are objectionable? So the first thing I go to in a big problem that shows up in my life, and I've had to work on more than one issue. I've treated my alcoholism with more than just alcohol, and there are things that I do with this spiritual discomfort in sobriety. That, and I always say, anything that will treat the spiritual malady that winds up in another 12-step program for it. That's how we get Gamblers Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous and pornography and gambling. I called up one of my buddies one time and I said, Tom, I can't stop playing internet poker. I mean, every night I'll log on and I'll play till 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I have 3 hours sleep and I rag it all day and I go, that's it. And then that night I go, well, it wouldn't hurt to look at a few hands. And the next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I got 17 cigarette butts in the ashtray, and it's going over and over. And this is when Katie and I were first getting together, and I'm kind of like giving her the bum's rush out of the house, and like I don't even call to check on her when she got home, because as soon as she leaves, I'm opening up and going, and this is going, and I call up Tom at one point. I go, Tom, I can't stop. And he goes, are you ready to quit for good? And I said, yeah. And he goes, get down on your knees and ask God to remove. Didn't see that one coming. He said, get down on your knees and ask God to remove the obsession. And I was like, really? And he goes, dude, that is a no-brainer for God. If God can handle heroin and vodka, internet poker is a walk in the park. But there is something that happened in that level of surrender and in that approach to 6 and 7 that made it a real piece of business between me and God. It wasn't just like, I think I need to quit playing internet poker. What it had come to was, the first thing is, do I find this behavior objectionable? Is it objectionable to me? Now, it'd been objectionable to Katie for a while, but now it's become completely objectionable to me. This behavior is not taking me where I want to go. So now it's objectionable. The second piece is, do I have the power to change it on my own? This is the second piece in 6 and 7. If this is objectionable to me, do I have the power to change it on my own? And I'd been exhibiting for a while now that I didn't have the power to change it on my own. Well, if I don't have the power, if it's objectionable to me and I don't have the power to change it on my own, the third piece of it is, am I willing for God to change it in whatever way He sees fit? It's not this conditional surrender. It's an unconditional surrender of saying, God, you take it and you do whatever you want with it, And if those three things are in place, then I take it to God in the 7th step and get down on my knees and I ask God to remove that obsession, remove that behavior. There is something that happens there that is big mojo magic, because whether I do it with food, whether I do it with pornography, whether I do it with internet poker, at the moment whether I do it with losing my temper at these shoots, when it becomes objectionable to me and I don't have the power to change it, and I'm willing for God to change it in whatever way He sees fit, when I take it to God in the 7th, now it's a real piece of business between me and God. So if I've done it with food, now it's not just another piece of pie, it's breaching this contract I've made with God in the 6th and 7th step, and there's a whole different level of, I'm not doing that. I haven't played a hand of internet poker since that day I got down on my knees. I've done the same thing with pornography. I've done the same thing with and I'm doing it with some other stuff now. I took this whole food thing into it with a different level of surrender this time, and it's not. It doesn't feel like I'm doing it on my will. It feels like it's being God with a new arrangement. Now, I'm not up here to talk about fudge, but But I'm telling you, this stuff is systemic, and it will treat all the area. There's a thing in here where it says, my friend, in Bill's story, it says, my friend promised me that when these things were in place, I would have the elements of a way of living which would solve all of my problems. And so now we're talking about all the stuff that we're going through, whether it's losing my temper, or whether it's because me losing my temper at shoots has been a big problem, because like if you miss, well, it's not that big. If I miss a target, everybody needs to wear black for 3 days and talk about it. I mean, I'm just self-obsessed with, I can't believe I just dropped 3 birds on that last station, and nobody cares, but I've embarrassed Katie in public. I've had to go back to these trappers one time, and the guys that throw the targets. And I said, man, hey guys, I'm sorry about my language back there. And this guy goes, hey man, I'm in the Marine Corps. He said, that's like church music to me. But I said, yeah, but I embarrassed my wife, and I'm really sorry. And it's funny because I'm talking to Marty one time. I wrote inventory on losing thing, and I'll never forget it because I'm writing inventory. I want to talk about how mad I get at these shoots. And Marty says, she talked about how Marty sometimes when she talks, she kind of has a little bit of this. And Marty goes, well, the thing was self-pity. And I'm going, and then she goes, and when we get into self-pity, a lot of times it's self-pity, and I go, God dang, Marty, you're saying self-pity a lot, and that's not really what I came to talk about, and she goes, but what I didn't realize was, I thought it was anger, but it was, it turns, because if you go, I can't believe I missed those 3 targets back then. Well, that sounds kind of manly, doesn't it? I mean, but if you just change the pitch of it and go, I can't believe I missed those 3 targets, now that's objectionable, I can't believe it, and throwing the shells into the trash can, and then you see other guys doing it, and you realize what jackasses they look like when they're doing it, But I mean, this 6 and 7 can carry a lot of weight now, where is it objectionable to me? Do I have the power to change it on my own? If I don't have the power to change, am I willing to let God change it in whatever way he sees fit? And then I take it to God in the 7th step prayer, and I say, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Wait, I've got the wrong prayer. My Creator. That's 3rd step prayer. It's a good one. We ought to keep it. But in the 7th step, I'm getting a little fried up here. In the 7th step, we go to him and we say, my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Woo! Then, after I've done those 4 things, I go out in the 8th step. Now, we're going to talk about the 8th step a little bit, but we really want to make sure we have time. We got time. We're doing pretty good.
Not too bad.
We're going to have time, but if I miss the self piece in the 3rd step, it says, first requirement is that I be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And I missed it again in the 4th step, where it says being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what had defeated me. And then I missed it again in the 8th step, because in the 8th step it says we attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live life on self-will and run the show ourselves. I mean, it's like, how did I sleep through all this stuff? Because it seems to me like everything is tied to self and self-will. And when it says above everything, we got to be rid of this selfishness, I think they mean above everything, we got to be rid of this selfishness, and boy, it makes the recovery picture a lot bigger and a lot better, and I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm just going to go for 7 minutes. And then we're going to take the break. I know after lunch it's so hard to stay awake. Charlie and I have also been out there and, watched. We haven't always facilitated. And I swear you're sitting there just going.
That's why I went with the funny stories about.
I know. Sometimes you just got to break tradition here. I just want to talk briefly about I'm going to give you my quick little 7 minutes on the 8 and 9. 8 and 9, once again, is so experiential. Don't ever send anybody to make an amends that is a very, very dicey amends until you have gotten enough counsel on this, right? Just going out there and saying, oh, God will take care of it is not always a good plan. You know, you got to always be in prayer that God's preparing the person's heart that you're going to make the amends to. It's not just always our side because it came to me, oh, I need to go do it. And so do keep that in mind. I'm going to go through these quickly. You don't have to get your book out. On page 82, it talks about the alcoholics, the tornado roaring through the lives of others. Page 83, a long road of reconstruction. We must take the lead. Page 83, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. 74, the rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Sometimes we forget that one. And we do. We are just such little sneaky snakes in that one. 79, all those reparations take innumerable form, and it goes into a lengthy deal to read. And then I love to the man we hate on page 77. These are all, and I'm reading these because they'll be on the CD. Page 77 is direct face-to-face amends. Page 78 is direct owing money. Page 78 is also for criminal offenses. Page 79 is for divorce, alimony, and child support. Page 80 is implicate others getting permission. You got to get the CDs. Don't try to write it. Domestic problems are page 80 and 81. Extramarital sex. They call that adultery. How much to tell, page 81. Jealousy, page 82. Cleaning house with the family, page 82. And wrongs we cannot right, page 83. Somebody had made a copy. It's a very good one, but now you got it in your book, so you know where you're going to at least give some foundation. I want to talk about 3 quick amends that I had a sponsee of mine. If you've ever had a falling out with your sponsor, does that sound like a hot topic? A falling out with your sponsor. This sponsee had a falling out with her my sponsee had a falling out with her sponsee. And she came to me and she said, I just handled it terrible. I feel bad. Well, good. I'm glad you feel bad. Let's work through it. Let's see where that amends is. And this was what she did. And I thought it was so cool. Did I get my glasses? Oh, hang on. Wrong specs.
There's some out here.
There's
some out there.
3
some
pair,
out there.
but they're the wrong ones. Ta-da! Okay, so this was, she asked the girl, she contacted her, and she said, can I write you a letter? And the girl said, I'd actually love a letter. Sometimes a letter's a good thing. And it says, I owe you an apology for the way I spoke to you several months ago, specifically the day I let you know I would no longer be able to sponsor you. I addressed you in a berating manner with a downright scolding tone. This did nothing but put a wedge between us and render me totally ineffective in an exchange that might have otherwise been helpful. I came at you angry, shaming you as though I was morally superior. I'm sure you must have felt like a scolded child. It was not my place, and I was wrong to have talked to you that way. Driven more by my self-centered need to prove my position, I lost true perspective and hit you with a damaging, self-righteous, fueled bombardment, angry words. You did not deserve that, and I am truly sorry that I left you with that kind of a sting and ugly impression. How self-centered of me to be thinking of only of me and protecting my so-called reputation. There was possibly an opportunity perhaps for me to be helpful to you that day, but it was lost in my efforts to manage on the basis of self-will. This I deeply regret, because what you needed most at that time I failed to give you. Perhaps I have left you with a sour perception of the role of a sponsor, and if so, I certainly couldn't blame you. I take full responsibility for leaving you with that. It must have been nothing short of a very bad taste in your mouth. I'm open to hearing from you further in regret to how this may have impacted you. In regards to how this may have impacted you. I have thought of you often, knowing you were facing some serious and frightening circumstances. If you'd like to bring me up to date on your progress, I'd welcome the opportunity to hear from you and how you're coming along. Isn't that powerful? We got a fatal illness, and I'm going to really come at you with a berating tone, and I've done it. And I mean to tell you, the person that leaves is the one who's most spiritually fit, the person that leaves most disturbed. And I am disturbed. That was a terrible way I handled that. And I've got to go back and clean it up. the same sponsee who's amazing at writing letters. I always like for these to be on the CD so you can really listen to them. This was another girl. Now, have you ever gone to somebody and said, hey, they're not feeling well, go, do you need some help? I mean, I'll help you. When I really don't want to help you. I'm just trying to be the swell guy. You with me on that? And then all of a sudden you go, yeah, oh, I'd love for you to come walk my dogs after my surgery. And then you're like, whoa, 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 this is more than I wanted to do. Well, she got herself into this bind. And this girl, after her surgery, was pissed at my sponsee. Of course she was. When my sponsee called to make an amends 2 years later, oh, yeah. Well, we're all capable of that one. Just ask yourself, when did you do that last? And the girl didn't want to have anything to do with it, right? She said, just write me a letter. So my sponsee's writing this letter to this girl. I want to apologize to you for the way I showed up in our relationship a couple of years ago. It was during a time when you were going through some serious and frightening back surgeries. I was simply the producer of confusion, and I really let you down when I dropped by your apartment that one afternoon to visit. By all accounts, I led you to believe I was someone you could count on, someone who would be there in times that you needed me. During the course of our visit, I asked you what I could do to help you, and you had specifically said that you needed someone that could come by, walk the dogs, and perhaps make a trip to the grocery store during the week. I told you I would help you where I could. This is where we're starting to crawfish out. However, I never followed through with any effort to help you. I made a few lame inquiries via text, chicken, you with me on that texting? Chicken. Which was nothing more than a self-centered effort to manage my reputation. I wanted to be seen as kind and helpful friend, but I gave you all words, unwilling to back it up with any action. My behavior was thoughtless and inconsiderate. I was only thinking of myself. I know this had deeply hurt you, and you rightfully let me know. You told me the truth about my behavior, and you were absolutely right to do so. This apology is long overdue, and I want to tell you that I sincerely regret my actions. I take 100% responsibility for the harm I needlessly created at a most crucial time in your life. I hope you are well, and I wish you all the good things in your life. This girl didn't really come around for quite some time. I think in the last 6 months, maybe she has. Now it's been about 5 years. But I think what we do is we have such a tendency to just brush off where we've hurt people. And we don't go back and take it to that depth. I mean, I'm not interested in, if you come to me with an amends, I'm not interested in how you felt when you did it. You want to talk about how I felt when you did it? Fine. I'm not interested in why you did it. Because your life was... I'm not interested in your excuses. That's what Charlie and I said the difference between boys and girls, the boys want to come and explain. Well, I was really going through some tough financial times, and, I'm sorry I took it out on you because I was... we women want to do the same thing, but it's always a different twist. Bottom line is in the amends process, you come and take 100% responsibility for how you treated that other person, period. No excuses, no reasons why, just how you treated that other person. We're going to take a break, and then I'm going to get into 2 more of these, and then I want to not miss the time for 10 and 11. So we're going to take a 15-minute break, and I'm holding you to that one. Okay, guys. I want to talk briefly about this amends process. Boys, quiet over there on the right. I have 2 amends that I want to talk about, and then I told Charlie, I said, by golly, we are getting to 10 and 11. We always run out of time because we stay too much in the technical aspect of 4 and 5. Oops. And so here's the deal. This level of self-reliance I'm talking about that we have is huge. You do realize that. You hurt, threaten, or interfere with my money, my marriage, or my children, and I'll kill both of us. Just the way that deal works out. And so when I was married for 20 years, like I said, Charlie and I were best friends, and I always like to joke. I'm good friends with both his ex-wives that are in the program, and it was an interesting dance they all did. And then, thank goodness, the third wife is out of the picture. She was just as much personality as the paint on this wall. You know what I mean? I mean, it was like, wow. And we never clicked. And I was married to Joe. You know what I mean? This was just a awkward deal. But Joe and I were together for 20 years. He went back out at 23 years sober and ended up dying of a heroin overdose. And when we talk about singleness of purpose too, I got to tell you, Joe was never alcoholic. But back when he got sober in the 70s, the only thing out was NA, and he hated NA. So I mean, there's really some real meaning in singleness of purpose, because when he relapsed and he tried to get sober again, he got a straight alcoholic. And the guy, it was, I mean, there's so much that has happened in my life that I see all the holes in AA that some people try to say, well, it's all one illness or it's all that. No, I got personal experience with that's not the case. The fact that Joe was able to stay sober for 23 years was impressive until he needed it again. And then he couldn't get it. And one of the things I can tell you is when Joe got sick, we were both self-employed, and we weren't sure what was wrong. They thought something was wrong with his head, so they wanted all this testing. And as you know, getting older, golly, your medical insurance can really be terrible. I mean, you're really at the mercy of the, your insurance. And I always say the insurance will not dictate my health. I can tell you that. And but we didn't have good health plan because we had catastrophic insurance. And the guy says Joe needs to have his head scanned. And we don't, take him into the hospital and all these tests. And I'm like, my God, I have no idea how much this is going to cost. You've already threatened me. I'm at 15 years sober. And Joe was always 6 years sober longer than I. And so this girl at my meeting said, hey, Katie, why don't you drive a school bus? And she said, and I was in the fitness business, so my hours were very flexible. And she said, so if you drive a school bus, you get an instant HMO, which, by the way, if you're needing instant medical assistance, get somebody in your family to drive a school bus. I mean, it's not a bad plan. And, I'm telling you, I'm getting, you need to nod your head and go, okay, I'm on it, because it's not a bad plan. And, however, you're stuck driving a school bus, okay? That is the part that sucks. But other than that, and so so I go down there, I get the school bus job. Now, what I don't see how self-centered I am. I'm the kind of girl who gets stuff done. You scare me bad enough, I go get it done. And that's just how I've always been. I'm quite the survivor. And so, I left home at 15, managed to get through high school. I wasn't the girl that was going to be homeless. I wasn't the girl that was going to be the hooker. I knew that because I just knew I had other ways. I'm not saying that's good, bad, right, wrong. I just knew that about me. I've always been that girl. Don't dare me. Don't devil dog dare me. I can get it done, blah, blah, blah. Now I may end up dying doing it, but I can get it done. And so I go to drive this school bus, and about 2 weeks into this school bus, Joe's not getting his head scanned. And the nearest neurologist appointment was 3 months out. So my GP says, just take him to the hospital. And they'll run you through a gamut of tests telling you you need his head scanned. And so we go in there and I tell Joe, if they tell you to touch your nose, touch your elbow, let's fail the test. Because, we're running a scam. I mean, come on, we are the best scammers you've ever met, right? Let me have you nod your head, please. Okay, I need to know I'm with my people here, and I mean, that's what we work an angle. We still work an angle. I don't care how long you're sober, you're still working an angle, on a lot of things. And so we get in there and we go in the emergency room, and we're not rushing to the hospital. It wasn't like he cut his arm off. We're just driving there, we're going to go in. So we go in, and this doc takes forever to decide to do a scan. And so then he finally asked Joe, he said, how much is 2 + 2? And Joe can't add it. And so he ends up getting his, the guy takes him in there, and when he comes back out, I will never forget this. He comes out after the head scan, and the doc comes in, and the doc puts his hand here. And remember, we're just behind the curtain, and he puts his hand here. He goes, my God, he's got a mass in his brain as big as my fist. And I'm telling you, he must have said it 3 times. That's when everything stops, right, in the world. I mean, how you accept news that is horrific is challenging. And all of a sudden, my very first thought was, my God, I'm going to be driving this school bus forever. That's how self-centered we are. See, I didn't say that to Joe. That was my very first thought. Not, oh, my God, how are we going to get through this? Oh, my God, Joe, I'm so sorry. It was like, oh, no. See, this was temporary. I am hitched my wagon to being a school bus driver because I got to have this medical insurance. Okay? Now, after 11 days in the hospital and massive surgery, we find out it's benign. We thought it was going to be lymphoma. We thought he had, a certain period of time to live. So Joe was going to live, but he had pretty good amount of brain damage. He had no physical damage. It didn't damage his walking or his sight or anything like that, but it did damage his mind. He turned into about 16-year-old, and we were doing the best we could. I was married to this man for health, good and bad, the whole deal. I'm in. I'm the girl. I am so committed as a wife. I'm all in. Well, it gets bad. I mean bad. He'll never work another day in his life, you name it. And I'm on this flippin' bus. Now, I want you to consider me in untreated alcoholism making $10 an hour when I could make $150 an hour in my business. $10 an hour, humbling myself to drive a school bus and having parents, some not even speak to me. She's just a servant. And I'm in untreated alcoholism. Now, there were some parents that loved me. It was fantastic. I mean, and then there was some, I was in a fairly affluent neighborhood, some that were just terrible. And there was one guy that used to come out in his BMW. If you're ever on a path where there's a bus, now I want you to all listen to this. If you are all of a sudden you see a bus coming down the street and there's 4 stops. Your job is to not haul ass past the bus so that you don't have to wait for them to stop. You're stuck like Chuck. Just sit and suck it up, okay? Because my job is to be sure you're not driving 70 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood with small children standing on the corner. And yours is to think, oh my God, I'm late, I'm going to have to haul ass, right? And so this BMW, and I don't know why he'd leave every time. I am so on time on the bus, right? And he would come out, and I'd see him pull out of his driveway, and there's 4 stops I got to make. And now, had I not been in untreated alcoholism, I probably would have waited a second. Let him just pass me. But in untreated alcoholism, it's me and him. And I swear to God, that guy would come at me, and you could just see him hauling ass. And I would not even get to a bus stop. I'd just wait till he was about where that wall is, and I'd just kick out the reds. And you just got to open the door, and those red would go, and he'd hit the brakes, and he'd go. And I go, who's got the power now, buddy, huh? It's me and you. I see you, I mean, I was that crazy. I was absolutely insane. Why he never turned me in is beyond me. I think he'd have to admit that he was hauling ass. But he never called my boss. He should have. Then the other thing I did hundreds of them. I mean, I hit a curb one time too hard, rounding the corner because somebody had just thrown up. If your kid's sick, please don't put them on the bus. They just threw up, and then if they throw up, it's just a chain reaction. All the kids look at them, and they're all puking. I got them all sticking their head out the window, and I'm trying to hurry, and I hit a curb and almost lay it on its side, and I had a gas bus that hauls ass. I mean, and I drove that bus for 3 years. 3 years with a sick husband and a full-blown career, and my husband was no longer going to be able to make his income, and it took me 2 years to get disability, even with a neurosurgeon's letter saying he will not be able to work. So I'm up against the system now. It's me against the world, and I'm in untreated alcoholism. And I'm not going to hire an attorney to get disability. I'm going to do it on my own. And I did. But I almost killed everybody in the process, right? And so what ended up happening is there was one time that there's these 2 humps that I love. I mean, the back end of a bus just kicks up, and the kids go, oh, they love that. They're just, whoa, do it again. And so there was these 2 humps, and then you had to come to a stop and take a right. Everybody's probably heard this story if you've heard my CD. And so one day, I look in the mirror, because your life is here, and I realize, oh my God, I only have boys on the bus, and they're all, elementary school age, and my son was one of them. And I said, hey guys, I go, you know what, move to the back of the bus. I'm going to take you over the humps. And so they all, oh yeah, run to the back of the bus. And so they're all sitting there, and I drove a gas bus because they haul ass over those diesels. I still drive fast. I love driving fast. And so all of a sudden I look up there and I see the kids, and I'm looking around to be sure no parents are standing there or anything. And I mean, I gas it. Now remember, I'm going to go over these 2 humps, and then I have to come to a stop quickly. And we don't think ahead. And so I gas it. And when I gas it, my God, I'm getting air. And I know it's like life slowed down. And I'm looking in the mirror, and these kids are this high over the seat. They're like, and I'm thinking, oh my God! And all I'm thinking is, come down. And I mean, we're still making it. And then all of a sudden, when we come down, I got to hit my brakes, and it just goes, and the kids are like this, they're, what just happened? I'm like, oh my God, what happened? And I'm making sure that I didn't break any kid's neck. Because, I mean, it was really dangerous. Have you ever done that? Yeah, come on, you put your kids in danger. And so, I mean, I just couldn't even believe I did. One time I swung my daughter on the back of the boat in a tube, almost right into the tree in the land. Wha! Knock her over. I was like, but we're just a bit of daredevils, too. And so we all jump off the bus. We go to the back of the bus, and I look down, and sure enough, I've broken all 4 valve stems, just blown them right off the back end of the bus. 4 flat tires, just and I thought, oh, my God. I am in so much trouble. I can't lose this bus job. This is my insurance. I got a sick husband. There's no way I could take care of he's got to have an MRI every 20 minutes, it was like. I can't, oh my God. So I get on the horn, it's like, turtle bus to base. Turtle bus to base. And you hear, bass go, Billy go, yeah, turtle bus, what's up? And the big boss man had a radio, always carried it right here. And I said, Billy, I said, God, I'm over on Lake Crest Drive. And I said, I just blew all 4 of my valve stems off the back end of my bus. And you hear the big boss man go, what? And I go, yeah. I said, I'm dead in the water, man. And so they go, we'll be there, in 15 minutes. And I mean, I'm standing there with the 4 horsemen in a sweat, losing it. Just losing it. I'm in so much trouble. And they pull up, and this is where you go. And the boss man comes, and I swear he does this. And he looks right at me, and he goes, you don't know what happened? And I'm telling you, I said, no, sir, I don't. And I'm not moving off the mark. I mean, I'm not telling him the truth, even if he says, did you go too fast over those hills? No, no, didn't. Because I can't afford to lose that job. He knew I was lying. I knew he knew that. And he said, okay. And one of the guys took me back, and they took care of the bus. They had to bring out and change the wheels and everything. I couldn't even believe it. Now, I felt guilty for doing that. Of course I did. Lying, you feel guilty. But it did not occur to me to make an amends until one time I'm telling this story, and somebody said, how'd that amends go? Which I thought was kind of tacky. But and then from that point on, the guilt was, I was overwhelmed with guilt. Now, I'm going to tell you how long it took me to make that amends. 15 years. 15 years it took me to make that amends. And I had to lie to find out the guy's number. Charlie and I don't do Facebook. And so I don't even know how to spell his last name, my bus boss. My bus boss is a good man, very good man. And I just loved this guy to death. And he was full of integrity and dignity, and you could tell he cared a lot for me. And I basically lied to him. So I knew that not only did I lie to him, he knew I was lying. I could have injured those children. His job was to take care of those children. He should have fired me on the spot, but he didn't. And so what I asked him to do was to lie for me, right? Take that risk. And so when I finally found him, I actually had to find him through somebody else. And this guy said, listen, I'm looking for so-and-so. He used to, work at the bus yard, blah, 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 blah. And the guy said, he goes, I'm actually good friends with him on Facebook. And what's this about? And here comes me. I mean, I'll lie right to you. You know what? I'm not proud of it, but I can lie. And I looked at him and I said, Thanksgiving's coming up, and I said, and I just want to tell him how thankful I am to have had him in my life 15 years ago, and I've been trying to get this message to him. That's going to pretty much get the guy to give him my info, right? And so sure enough, I get a text the next day, and it says, hey, this is David, da-da-da-da. I heard you wanted to talk to me something about Thanksgiving. I'm like, well. So when we finally got on the phone with each other, he goes, Katie, I don't think this is about Thanksgiving. Because you're going to do small talk because you're nervous as hell. I mean, this isn't like you just go, okay, here we go. I'm pretty nervous. I'm so ashamed of myself. And when we started talking, he started that uncontrollable laughing. That's it. And I was like, oh, this is not funny. And I told him about it. And then when he stopped, he goes, oh, Katie, he goes, I knew you were lying. And I said, I know, but it's not about the lie. It's about what you had to do. You're a man of integrity. You're a man of dignity and honor. And you knew I was lying. And you still cut me a break when I put those kids in danger. And that's when he went into this story. And we talked for about 20 minutes. And he talked to me about how his mother had just died. And that he'd quit working and spent a year with her. And that I reminded him of his mother. And that, she was the same type of strong-willed woman that I was. And he went off into this whole thing. Then he kind of got teary-eyed. It was so moving. It was so awesome. And by the time we were done with it, I couldn't believe I waited 15 years to do this. It was like, wow, what I put myself through and what was so amazing was always waiting there for me. And we got off, and then he sent me a text, and he goes, you just restored my faith in humanity. That's a bold statement. And so don't let anybody talk you out of the amends process, okay? And then I'm going to tell my one last story, and then I'll give it to you, honey, for your amends, and then we're going to go into 10 and 11. Because it's so easy to get off on these things, especially storytelling. That's what we all do so beautifully. My father and I bucked heads so badly, and I was 10 years sober, and I was not nice to my dad. My dad didn't do anything to me. It's almost exact same situation that Roy had with his father. I made my dad pay for after my mom died. She died of a kidney disease. My dad remarried 3 times in 18 months. And we had, he's quite a player. And we had 4 live-in housekeepers. So those 7 women came through our house very rapidly. But it was 1967, for heaven's sakes. It was a different day and time. And my dad was such a cool guy, but he and I just bucked heads on everything. And I always felt like I was just a nuisance, but I never looked at how much I demanded out of my dad, right? You got that kid that just demands all your undivided attention. You just don't have it. And then they're stubborn and hard-headed, and that's how I was. And so my dad and I bucked heads. Well, I then began this whole... I believed strongly that my dad screwed me up. And because of all these women and all of this nonsense, I didn't realize that my alcoholism was a genetic bullet. I didn't get that. So I misunderstood everything when I came into AA. I'm 10 years sober. I'm doing codependency group therapy. That's why I caution you very much. It's a gift. It's a privilege to do it. But boy, if somebody's not taking you to that 4th column, be very careful. They will make you cause your family even more damage than you've already got, because you got to look at yourself. So I made my dad pay so badly for it, and then I finally just told him I just didn't dig my stepmom. She was my stepmom till my dad died unexpectedly in a surgery at 72 years old. And I really even had a feeling of good riddance. That's heartless. We can be that heartless. You know what? I don't have to worry anymore. And when I came out of this deal, I'm telling you, when I came out of untreated alcoholism, I could not stop crying at how I really damaged this relationship between my dad and I. And I'm here to tell you guys, I knew my dad and I would never skip down the yellow brick road. Don't misunderstand me. But we could have had something, because I would have shown up different. And it would have been we would have bucked heads, but I'd have kept my mouth shut a lot more than I did. Any issue that we could talk about, we were so argumentative. Nothing was good but an argument. So then what ended up happening is when my dad died, I come out of untreated alcoholism, and I am in great grief behind how much I gave my dad, so much pain and anguish. How when he said at 15 years old, when I was 15 years old, if you can't live in this house, then you need pack your bags and go. He never intended for me to, and I did, just to make him pay. Now, I never considered him laying in bed at night, how scared he must have been for me, how worried he was about me, how he regretted deeply ever saying that. I saw it as a ticket out. Never gave it a second thought. All of these things are flooding in, right? And so I'm going to God, and my dad was cremated. I had a big fiasco at the funeral. Oh, of course I did. I'm the sister who can give you an FU at a funeral. You know what I mean? I'm untreated alcoholism. I'm no different than when I was drinking. Anybody else relate? Once again, a couple of nodding of the heads would be helpful here at this point. Yeah, so you're like, or either I'm looking into your soul. I'm not quite sure which one, but so long story short, I'm in tremendous pain, and I'm going to prayer on all of this stuff, right? I'm probably at 22, 23 years sober, going to prayer, and it was amazing because my dad was cremated. It wasn't going to be that, I tried the letter, the gravesite, there really wasn't one. I tried everything. And then all of a sudden one day I heard that still quiet voice say, go make an amends to your stepmom. He loved her deeply. And I thought, yeah, no. That's how quickly I answered it. No. Let's go back to the prayer. Yeah, that one, not going to work. And about 2 days later, heard the exact same message. Go make it to your stepmom. And I told Charlie about it, and I thought, I think I have to do this. I so don't want to. I haven't talked to her in years. And my dad loved her, the last one. So I'm going to leave that story out. You don't have to worry. I'm not going to rat you out. And so, but it's a good one. It doesn't shine well on Charlie, and I've already kicked him around a few times, so I'm not going to do that anymore. So I'm going to go to I call her, and I said, Mom, can I come talk to you? I've got some things to talk about. She goes, absolutely. And I get ready to go to San Antonio, about an hour away from Austin. And I am nervous as can be. And I pull up, I go by and I get Arby's, and she's getting so old. And I sit down with her, and I said, I wanted to come and talk to you about all the harm I caused you. And I'm telling you guys, I couldn't even speak. I was so overwhelmed with emotion that she was so willing to talk to me. And what was so amazing is she was tough. She's just like me, boy. She was tough gal. She had 2 kids of her own. And I am crying and talking about from the day I left at 15, and she's just handing me tissue. She's not stopping me. Just keep on talking. And by the time I got through all of it, I told her how sorry I was and all the heartache I'd caused him. And she said to me, she looked at me and she goes, stop it. Stop doing this. She said, your father loved you deeply. I didn't think he did. How does a parent not love a child? You ask yourself, could you ever not love your children? No, not at all. Until they become my parent and I think they can't love me. You see, I've got the roles mixed up. My dad loved me. We just didn't get along. And so what ended up happening, the next thing I knew, it opened up a door for me to be in Evelyn's life. It freed me of all the pain and guilt of my dad. And the next thing I know, I got to go make amends to her 2 kids. We're all grown. Jeez Louise. I'm in my 50s when I make this amends. I get to go make an amends to my stepbrother, who I said F you at my dad's funeral too. Yeah, that's lovely. I got to sit with him and tell him how sorry I was. He invited me to his wedding. It was his 7th wedding, but I did get invited. And we always give him a hard time on that. Which one is this one? And then my stepsister, oh my God, my stepsister and I's relationship has been unbelievable. Unbelievable. I got to go to her daughter's wedding. I got to be named the executor on my stepmom's medical stuff when my stepsister was out of town. And it opened this door. Now, I'll tell you something. What I didn't see coming is I really didn't know how much I wanted to be in. I don't really like this on CD. In case anybody ever hears it. I'm just telling you. So now all of a sudden I got to show up. See, I kind of like that day. Okay, now you go on your merry way and I'll go on my merry way. Instead I'm in. And it's turned out to be fantastic. But I was very comfortable in my life. And one of the things I can tell you about the amends process, guys, is don't All God wants is you to be unity with your family. Period. That's all he wants. Because when you're on your dying bed, you can have all the AA members come to you, but then you're going to wish you'd have done something with your sister, something with your mother, something with your brother. And that doesn't mean you got to meet them every day. It doesn't mean you got to have coffee with them. Heck, you don't even have to spend the holidays together. But to have a relationship with that sibling or that parent is what God's trying to get us to heal our hearts. And I miss the whole thing. And I'm here to tell you that what he's done to me, he's given me someone in AA, and I won't mention their name, who's my dad. I don't think he wants to be my dad, but he is. And he and I have bucked heads right out of the get-go. And I even said F you to him. That was delightful, really stepped right out there. And after it was said and done, I heard the undeniable voice of God say, you get to have that relationship with your dad that you didn't have with this man. But you got to stop fighting him. And I swear I have just enjoyed his company. If he snaps at me, that's all right. Water off my back. I'm not going to go, God, you'd have to talk to me like that. That's what I did. That attitude was what God took from me. And I'm telling you, he will replace that pain. He will give you what you don't think you can ever get back. And just for what that's worth. Thanks. Mm-hmm.